Han Li's Wuxia Adventures. Chapter 2945. To tell the truth, Arbor didn't want to pay attention to this idiot. She came to find an instructor to cancel her leave, so she didn't have the time to bicker with this idiot. Arbor immediately circled around his stool with small steps, unwilling to even spare him a glance out of the corner of her eye. Su Shihua was thoroughly enraged. He abruptly kicked the stool next to him and darted to the side, blocking in front of Arbor again. Ever since he became famous, no one had dared to be so impudent in front of him. So what if she was the crown princess? In this world, strength reigned supreme. His teacher had once said that he, Su Shihua, was destined to be a dragon among men and would certainly ascend to mystique venerable rank within 300 years. Ever since he entered this academy, he had always been admired because he had already reached the peak of the 15th level of the spirit realm at the mere age of 21. He didn't know how many female shoujo were rushing in front of him. Moreover, Su Shihua was the kind of man with a glib tongue. He usually played like a fish in water among female cultivators, and the number of women who wanted to become his partner could line up from the Imperial Academy all the way to the great north-facing forest. He had always thought highly of himself, so he simply couldn't tolerate Arbor's attitude toward him. The status of female cultivators in the upper 3 provinces truly wasn't high. Due to innate restrictions, only 10 or 20% of female cultivators could perfectly pass the 5 spirits reincarnation trial and break through to the god realm. In the eyes of Su Shihua and many male cultivators, female cultivators should obediently submit to men. This was in accordance with the rules of the upper 3 provinces. A stoic face like the little stoic, who could draw hatred wherever she went, immediately infuriated Su Shihua. He summoned a long saber with a blue watery glow from his conscience and slashed it in Arbor's direction without another word. Refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Su Shihua's eyes flashed with a cold glint. You're merely a future crown princess whose status hasn't been confirmed, yet you dare to be so impudent in front of senior. His Highness the Crown Prince truly doesn't know how to teach women. Su Shihua sneered. Since that was the case, then he would take His Highness the Crown Prince's place to properly teach this woman who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth a lesson. He would teach her a principle. In the upper 3 continents, identity didn't mean everything. The saber landed on the ground in the courtyard, leaving a long white mark. Su Shihua shouted angrily. The moment his saber slashed through the air, he couldn't help but frown slightly. How did that last dodge it? It was strange that he couldn't see her movements. However, even if he was slightly faster, there was no way he could escape from him. He was a level 15 Great Spirit Master and possessed 8 levels of the Water Spirit. For ordinary people, being able to comprehend 6 levels of the 5 spirit origins was already not bad. Of course, Su Shihua didn't know that what Arbor had comprehended was the source of holy water. It had long since surpassed the 9th level of spirit water. At this time, Su Shihua still had great confidence in himself. He raised the long saber in his hand and encircled the long saber with both hands, completely enveloping it. Immediately afterwards, he leaped forward and arrived in front of Qiao Mu. His eyes flashed, and the long saber slashed at the hem of her skirt. This despicable thing. Arbor glanced at him coldly and dodged his blade with extreme speed. You're courting death. This man's objective was too clear. Did he want to make a fool of Jojo? Did he want to seize the opportunity to rip apart her clothes and expose her to others? Ha ha. Naive guy, just let him suffer the consequences of his own actions. Chapter 2946. Xiao Mu's fury was completely enraged. Originally, she didn't want to cause so much trouble and just ignored this lowly man in front of her. Who knew that when she wanted to settle the matter peacefully, the other party would keep pushing her? She, Arbor, had never been a person who was afraid of trouble. She just found it troublesome. However, since the other party wanted to die so badly, then she would fulfill his wish. Su Shihua felt that the aura of the girl in front of him had completely changed in an instant. Previously, she still had a lazy attitude. Now, she was like a little hedgehog with countless spikes all over her body. Her pair of cold eyes contained a fierce light as she coldly stared at him without blinking. This gaze made his heart inexplicably skip a beat. At the same time, he felt that he was actually frightened by the little girl's gaze. It was really intolerable. Su Shihua was a little angry from embarrassment. He couldn't help but sneer, "Arbor, today let me teach you the principles of being a person. Don't be too ruthless in everything. Women should be more obedient. Don't force yourself to do everything." Su Shihua's words were full of contempt for the woman. His attitude was arrogant, and he raised his chin slightly, like a peacock with its tail open. She didn't know where he got the face to be so arrogant in front of her. "Go die." Xiaomu glared at him impatiently before throwing out two small, round, transparent balls with a flip of her hand. The commotion caused by Su Shihua's machete had already attracted the people who were in class in the cultivation hall. When Mentor Ma rushed out with a group of students, he just happened to see Miss Chiao throw the two small transparent balls in Su Shihua's direction. Su Shihua smiled contemptuously. Part of the spiritual armor formed on his arm and blocked in front of him, intending to wave away the two small balls that were flying straight at him. "Just two spiritual energy balls and you want to show off in front of me? You're too naive, right? Su Shihua, get out of the way." Mentor Ma's eyes narrowed and couldn't help but roar. "What spiritual energy balls? Those were obviously God power, right? These were two godly power balls, all right? Two. Oh my God, she was indeed the crown princess of the divine land. She could casually throw out two priceless divine power balls. No, now wasn't the time to think about this problem, but everyone, get into formation. Open the defensive barrier. Defend, defend." The instructors shrieked. Everyone was in a state of panic as they activated their defensive spirit artifacts. Those who had spirit armor quickly formed a spirit armor to protect themselves. The instructors took a step forward and worked together to set up a large defensive barrier. At the same time, boom. Boom. Two thunder-like tremors resounded in the small courtyard of the cultivation hall, the sound piercing through the clouds. Even the students in the other halls who were in the middle of their lessons were shocked. In the armament refining branch, a thin and tall youth who was standing beside Emo Yen and carefully crafting a defensive profound weapon could not help but tremble and almost put a material into the weapon cauldron by mistake. "Fuck. I was so scared that my hands were shaking," the young man mumbled. "The sound seems to be coming from the direction of the refining hall." Instructor Zhang from the refining hall couldn't help but look out of the window. Emo Yen kept a weapon in the weapon cauldron. After greeting Instructor Zhang, she quickly walked out. He felt that such a big commotion should be caused by his Jojo. When Emo Yen thought of this, she couldn't help but want to cover her face. Chapter 2947. When Instructor Zhang saw that everyone was craning their necks to look outside, he knew that they weren't in the mood to continue refining, so he said, "That's all for today. Those who want to leave can disperse." All the students hastily tidied up their utensils and remnants of materials. They didn't even have time to tidy them up before hastily stuffing them into their inner worlds. Then, they surged out with the large group and headed to the cultivation hall to watch the show. Cough, 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 cough. Instructor Ma forcefully waved the foggy dust in front of his eyes. He blinked his eyes twice in succession before he could clearly see what kind of scene was in front of him. A perfectly good cultivation hall had a large hole opened up in the middle. It was at least 10 meters deep. Su Shihua had probably fallen into the hole because no one could find him even after a long time. The little stoic expressionlessly stood next to the hole with her hands behind her back. She had the demeanor of a great master, causing people to involuntarily twitch their mouths. although it looked like Su Shihua had been tricked quite miserably. But for some reason, everyone had an inexplicable urge to burst into laughter. No, they couldn't laugh. Su Shihua was already very miserable, so they absolutely couldn't laugh out loud. It was unknown which dear friend couldn't hold it in and choked on his saliva before bursting into laughter. When he saw Instructor Ma glaring fiercely at him, he hastily turned his back and pretended to cough. Student Arbor. Instructor Ma simply didn't know what to say. You. He stuttered for a long time but actually couldn't continue. Instructor Ma actually felt at a loss for words when faced with that expressionless stoic face. Simply outrageous. Instructor Ma squeezed out these 5 words after a long time. He pointed at Instructor Gao on the side. You say it. Instructor Gao's mouth twitched. He walked forward a few steps and cleared his throat. Student Xiao, what exactly is going on? Can you tell the teachers about it? Everyone at the same time. Instructors, how big of a misunderstanding do you have about Student Xiao to think that this little fellow is someone who's willing to waste time explaining things to them? Talk to the teachers. Talk my ass. Look at this little girl's expression, she's too lazy to talk. Arbor looked at them expressionlessly, then lowered his head to look at the hole that was more than 10 meters deep. When he felt a scorching aura rising from the bottom of the pit, he knew that Su Shihua had finally recovered and was about to come up. The little stoic was expressionless. She took out another 2 god power balls from her pocket and directly smashed them into that pit under the horrified gazes of all the mentors and students. Don't. Mentor Ma was so agitated that his voice cracked. However, as soon as he said that, the 2 godly power balls bounced out. Boom! Boom! Everyone was dumbfounded. The entire place was silent. Except for the occasional person who swallowed hard. When Mo Lien dashed over, she almost bumped into Duan Yu's group at the entrance. He turned to look and saw that there were actually many fellows following behind Duan Yu who came to watch the show. The people from the pill hall also came over. Everyone gathered together and squeezed through the bamboo-fenced courtyard walls of the cultivation hall. As soon as they entered the room, they saw such a strange scene. The mentors and students of the cultivation hall looked like their acupoints had been hit as they stood there speechlessly, looking as comical as blocks of wood. Chapter 2948. What happened? Mo Lien held back her laughter as she slowly walked towards her Jojo. Looking at the situation in front of him, was it really his Jojo who caused trouble again? Arbor glanced at him and silently put the 2 god power balls that she was about to throw back into her pocket. A fly flew in front of me and nagged me. It's fine now. He was probably beaten half to death and must have been taught a great lesson. What kind of girl should listen to a man obediently? He. This strange man actually jumped out of his own accord and wanted to teach her how to be a person. Then he should learn how to be a person first. Arbor smirked sarcastically and went forward to hold Mo Lien's hand. Suddenly thinking of something, Arbor hurriedly turned her head to look at Instructor Ma and said, I'm here to cancel my leave. Mentor Ma was so angry that he didn't know where to vent. Before he could speak, he heard the little girl rebuke, the students of your academy are too outrageous. I'm here to cancel my leave, and he actually waited for me to come. Here, there, and here. He should pay for all the compensation. Arbor pointed at the floor tiles and the potted plants that were damaged during the fight. And the time I wasted, he should compensate me according to the price. What's his name again? Arbor finally remembered to ask for the person's name. Instructor Ma and the others didn't know what to say to her. They had seen the guilty party complaining first, but they had never seen such a vile act. This little girl smashed the person until he fell into a hole and couldn't climb out, and she still asked for compensation. The compensation isn't much, just 100,000 spirit coins. Qi Xianxian tugged at her sleeves and reminded her, Xiao, the Academy's compensation is converted into contribution points. Oh. Arbor looked at Instructor Ma expressionlessly, then transfer 3,000 contribution points from that person's account to me. He got off easy. After that, she couldn't help but ask again, what's his name? Mentor Ma and the others all felt that encountering this guy was simply bad luck since their ancestors. Hua. At this moment, a voice came from outside the courtyard. He saw a man in a royal blue robe with his black hair neatly combed up. He quickly walked through the door and arrived at the edge of the pit in a few steps. At this moment, Su Shihua was also relying on his own strength to crawl to the edge of the pit bit by bit. When he looked up, he saw his elder brother, Mo Shikang, looking at him with concern. Su Shihua suddenly felt a stomach full of bitterness and grievances. All of it surged into his heart, and he wished he could cry out loud. At this moment, he no longer had that high-spirited appearance from before. He looked like a bald beggar. There was a bald patch on the top of his head, and not even a blade of grass could grow on it. He also felt a burning pain on his face. He couldn't have been disfigured by that ruthless girl, right? At the thought that his face might be ruined by the other party, Su Shihua couldn't help but panic. He kept raising his hand to touch his face. Although he was a man and didn't need to pay too much attention to his appearance, it didn't mean that he could accept a disfigured face. Big brother. Su Shihua quickly grabbed Mo Shikang's hand tightly. Mo Shikang's gaze was also somewhat complicated. His gaze turned and landed on Prince Mo and Arbor. These two were still as elegant as ever. Even if they were just standing in the crowd with indifferent gazes, there was a sense of alienation and unapproachable. Chapter 2949. Greetings, Crown Prince, Crown Princess. Mo Shikang turned around and cupped his hands in greeting towards Prince Mo and Arbor. Oh, Brother King Zheng has also come. Mo Lien nodded and responded absent-mindedly. King Zheng, Mo Shikang, reached out and pulled Su Shihua up from the edge of the pit. He turned his head to look at Arbor and asked in a low voice, how did my younger brother offend the Crown Princess to actually provoke the Crown Princess to kill him? Su Shihua's current appearance was truly a bit tragic. Mo Shikang almost couldn't bear to look straight at him. The Crown Princess' actions were too much. What kind of deep hatred could there be for her to act like this and continuously hit Su Shihua with God Power Pearls? Although Su Shihua's cultivation had already reached the 15th level of the Spirit Realm, he still hadn't broken through to the God Realm. How could he withstand being hit by the God Power Pearls again and again? No wonder he looked so miserable now. Being hit by the God Power Pearls like this, even if he didn't die, a layer of his skin would be smashed off. Big brother. Avenge me, big brother. Su Shihua finally straightened his body with great difficulty and uttered broken syllables from his mouth. He stared in shock and anger as he said, she tricked big brother. She tricked. A trace of anger and resentment flashed through Su Shihua's eyes. He used all his strength to grab his big brother Mo Shikang's hand and stuttered. If this woman hadn't suddenly thrown so many God Power Pearls at him, how could he have been beaten to the point where he had no room to retaliate? It was simply a joke. In Su Shihua's opinion, Arbor who used the aura concealing talisman was merely a little third-level spirit master. If Su Shihua wanted to crush a little third-level spirit master like this, it would be a matter of minutes. However, things didn't go as he wished. The result was that he, Su Shihua, was beaten up and fell into the pit like a dead dog, unable to climb out. This matter made Su Shihua unable to raise his head. Especially in front of a few junior sisters who had rushed over after hearing the news, and who usually had great admiration for him, he simply did not know what to do. He was so angry that he was about to explode. His scarlet eyes stared at Arbor. Arbor. Pa. Before Su Shihua could figure out what was going on, he was slapped hard on the cheek. With a crisp, "pa" sound, the corner of his mouth was slightly crooked, and he staggered back a few steps. Only when Mo Shikong reached out to support him did he manage to stabilize himself. "Big brother." Su Shihua raised his hand to cover half of his face that was in so much pain. He looked at his big brother with reddened eyes. Although he didn't say anything, the meaning in his eyes was very obvious. "Others have already bullied your younger brother like this, don't you have anything to say?" Mo Shikong's face was also very ugly at this time. He turned his head and looked at Prince Mo, who had personally slapped his younger brother Su Shihua across the air. "Your Highness, my younger brother is young and insensible. He has made a fool of himself. When I go back, I will definitely teach him well. Brother Zheng really doesn't know how to teach sister-in-law." Ever since seeing Mo Shikong's appearance and the interaction between him and Su Shihua, Arbor finally understood who this man in front of her was. She finally understood why this strange man would suddenly make a move on her. It turned out that this Su Shihua was the elder brother of Princess Tao, who she had previously taught a lesson in the Despondent Pavilion. Indeed, like sister, like brother. Both of them were unreasonable people. Mo Shikong tightly pursed his lips and suppressed the anger in his belly. Chapter 2950. When he noticed the faint mockery on Xiao Mu's face, the anger in his heart shot up in a flash. He almost couldn't suppress it. "Crown Princess. You have already used so many divine power balls to teach my brother a lesson. What more do you want?" Mo Shikong's tone was very cold, as if he had been fished out from the depths of cold water. Although he didn't say anything, his opinion of this young crown prince consort had plummeted to the freezing point. He always felt that this girl should be a shrew. If she entered the Mo family, she would definitely cause the entire royal family to have no peaceful days. Mo Lian's face also darkened, and her gaze towards King Zheng became extremely cold. "Brother King Zheng, you don't understand the situation," and directly yelled at the crown princess. "Do you think that all the responsibility lies on the crown princess? Was it not?" Mo Shikong looked at Mo Lian with an ugly expression. He tightly clenched his fist and desperately suppressed his anger. But a wave of evil fire still burned from the bottom of his heart, and he couldn't control it. It was too infuriating. "Your Highness, to be honest, if the crown princess hadn't used so many divine power balls in succession, how could Hua have been beaten so badly? In terms of strength, the crown princess won't even be able to touch a strand of Hua's hair. Was it not?" Mo Shikong coldly looked at Prince Mo's icy expression. He slowly lowered his eyes and said indifferently, "Your Highness should know very well whether what I said is the truth or not. You don't agree?" Mo Lian turned her head and coldly looked at Su Shihua, who shrunk his neck and stood behind his elder brother Mo Shikong, and asked very forcefully. Su Shihua was pricked by the cold air released by the crown prince for no reason. He couldn't help but tremble for a while, but he forced himself to nod repeatedly. "Of course I don't agree." His thoughts were basically the same as his elder brother Mo Shikong. If Arbor hadn't cheated by using so many divine power balls, wouldn't it have been a matter of minutes for him to crush the little girl in front of him with his cultivation as a level 15 great spiritual master? Arbor smirked and looked at him casually. "If you're not convinced, let's continue. Didn't you say you wanted to teach this crown princess a lesson? Come." Arbor waved his small hand at Su Shihua. He looked like he was calling for a cat or a dog to come forward. The trace of mockery in his eyes was almost clearly discernible. There was actually someone who was rushing to be beaten up. Mo Lian also expressed that she didn't understand. She smiled and squeezed the little fellow's little hand. She slowly walked back a few steps, leaving an open space beside the deep pit for the two to fight. "Hurry up." Xiao Mu grumpily hollered at Su Shihua, "Can't you generate spiritual armor? I'll also create a spiritual armor for you to see." Heh. Su Shihua was unexpectedly amused by the little fellow. You're just a little level 3 spiritual master. What kind of spiritual armor can you generate? The spiritual armor generated by normal people was a partial defense, such as the arms, chest, head, and so on. Su Shihua, for example, was able to generate spiritual armor on both arms. He thought that he was already pretty good. After all, some people could only generate spiritual armor for one arm. If he wanted to expand the range of the spirit armor, it would take a lot of effort to expand every part of the armor. Arbor looked coldly at Su Shihua, who had generated spiritual armor on both arms. Her small mouth inadvertently curled into a lazy arc. You're a frog in a well. Arrogant fool. Chapter 2951. Today, he would let this idiot know that there was always someone better than him out there. In the future, he wouldn't easily offend some people that he couldn't handle. Arbor sneered. In an instant, a faint transparent layer of spiritual armor covered her red battle clothes like a second layer of skin and quickly spread up. It spread from her limbs to her chest and back, then wrapped around her slender neck. It climbed all the way up until it completely covered her head. From head to toe, a full-body spiritual armor was formed in an instant. The light and thin full-body spirit armor clung to his clothes, almost as if it didn't exist. However, anyone with eyes could see that this was a peerless full-body spiritual armor. Everyone simultaneously sucked in a breath of cold air and stared fixedly at Xiao Mu as if they were looking at a little monster. This little girl could actually form a full-body spiritual armor. Weren't spirit masters below level 5 unable to form spiritual armor on their own? Why was it that when it came to this little girl, it was as if the laws of heaven and earth didn't exist? Qi Xianxian jumped up excitedly and waved her little fist in the air. Jojo is mighty, Jojo will win. Duanmu Qing and the others standing beside her wanted nothing more than to go up and cover Xuanxuan's mouth. This guy who lacked a backbone, with this roar, everyone's attention was attracted to them. Full-body spiritual armor. Su Shihua looked at Arbor in front of him in shock. He simply didn't know how to describe his feelings at this moment. The little girl actually formed a full-body spiritual armor with a wave of her hand and covered her from head to toe. Before he could react, the little girl in front of him lightly tapped her foot and rushed towards him like a speeding cannonball. That speed could almost be described as light. She was as fast as a streak of cold light and arrived in front of Su Shihua with a whoosh. Su Shihua only had time to cross his arms in front of him and block her sudden punch. Bang! The little girl's fist landed on his crossed arms, and a crack instantly appeared on the spirit armor covering his arms with a crisp, crack sound. Everyone was dumbfounded. Was this the speed and strength of a level 3 spirit master? It didn't look like it at all. Is Su Shihua a rank 15 great spirit master? That's right. Not only is he a level 15 great spirit master, but he also has an 8th level water spirit. The young lady seems to have fierce firepower, but she might not be Su Shihua's match. Before the person could finish complaining, he saw the young lady throw 2 more punches. She punched Su Shihua's face. In order to block her old fists, Su Shihua had no choice but to cross his arms and guard his front. As a result, the spiritual armor that formed on his arms completely shattered with a crack under Xiao Mu's 3 punches. The onlookers standing in the front row could hardly believe their eyes. What? A level 3 little soul master was able to shatter the defensive spiritual armor of a level 15 great soul master. This was simply a joke. Impossible, impossible. The onlookers in the front row could not help but raise their hands and rub their eyes. Then, they opened their mouths wide in shock. Because at the same time, they saw a horrifying scene. After Miss Qiao shattered the spirit armor on the other person's arm, she pulled out a huge black axe that was even taller than her. Chapter 2952. With a momentum that could topple mountains and overturn seas, she ferociously smashed down on Su Shihua's head. If she hit him, wouldn't Su Shihua's head split open like a melon ladle? Red and white would all be exposed. Everyone couldn't resist closing their eyes, and the more timid ones even raised their hands to block their eyes. In the blink of an eye, Su Shihua continuously retreated several steps and threw out defensive spiritual tools from his inner world, putting them on himself one by one. Su Shihua felt that it was absolutely impossible for him to receive the enormous might of the axe before him. Ah Hua! Mo Shikong's pupils contracted, and he cried out in alarm. His figure swayed, but just as he was about to step forward, he was stopped by Prince Mo. It's best that brother Prince Cheng doesn't act rashly. Mo Lien said indifferently, if brother Prince Cheng is itching for a fight, why don't I exchange a few moves with brother Prince? The implication was that Prince Cheng absolutely couldn't be allowed to step forward and meddle in this matter. Not to mention that Arbor was disgusted with calling his parents when he couldn't win. Mo Lien was also very disgusted. Obviously, everything was caused by him, but because he couldn't beat Xiao Qiao, he repeatedly pretended to be the victim. Wouldn't everything be fine if you didn't stir up trouble? He didn't believe that Jojo would rush up to fight him for no reason while he was walking on the road. 99% of the people who could cause such a big conflict with Xiao Qiao were their own doing. Mo Shikong's gaze was slightly angry as he glared at Mo Lien and said, Your Highness the Crown Prince, brother Prince Cheng doesn't need to say anything. Mo Lien's gaze was still as ice, and she sneered, Brother Prince Cheng, don't tell me you don't know who caused today's matter. Wanting to pat his butt and scram after stirring up trouble. Did he think that they were good-natured people who could be easily molded? But Mo Shikong still wanted to say something, but that little stoic's axe had already landed. The huge black axe crashed into Su Shihua's outer defensive barrier and shattered it with a bang. Soon after, everyone saw the little stoic shattering Su Shihua's defenses one after another like a hot knife through butter. Su Shihua's body continuously emitted crackling sounds like firecrackers. In the end, he spat out a mouthful of blood and stumbled back a dozen steps before falling to the ground. He hung his head dejectedly and looked at Arbor in horror. Arbor pointed his sword at Su Shihua's throat. Please show mercy. Mo Shikong roared angrily and hastily leaped in front of Su Shihua to block the little stoic's longsword. With a swipe of his right hand, Mo Shikong took out a golden token from his inner world and waved it slightly in front of the little stoic. He said gravely, Crown Princess, this prince has the Emperor's death exemption golden medallion in hand. This prince is now ordering you to immediately stop all attacks. Kill him. Mo Lien's gaze chilled, and she seemed to murmur softly to the air. But the instant the command was issued, for incomparably swift shadows appeared around the little stoic. They circled around Mo Shikong's figure and leaped towards Su Shihua. 4 long swords simultaneously stabbed towards Su Shihua without the slightest bit of hesitation. Emperor's Shadow Guards. The most elite secret squad of the underworld court guards. Mo Shikong's pupils contracted repeatedly. At this critical juncture, he obtained strength from who knows where, but his entire body abruptly burst forth with an intense divine power, blocking the 4 people's attacks one after another. Chapter 2954. In front of the little crown princess, this death-free gold medallion given by the great emperor was of no use at all. The young crown prince consort's attitude was clearly stated. She wanted Su Shihua to commit suicide and let him know that not everyone's place could be so easily provoked. Many times, his big brother might not be able to protect him for a lifetime. Looking at the long sword that was lying quietly on the ground with a faint green light flowing around it, Mo Shikong's face turned purple with anger. Big brother, big brother. Su Shihua was a little panicked. He secretly glanced at the little crown princess's cold face, then hurriedly crawled forward and hugged his big brother's trousers. Big brother, save me, big brother. How could this crown princess be so difficult to deal with? His big brother had already blocked the attack of the 4 hidden guards for him. His big brother had even vomited blood, what else did she want? And the few girls who originally came to watch the show with laughter also had ugly expressions. They were all junior brother Su's admirers and pursuers before. After all, with Su Shihua's family background as the younger brother of King Zheng, coupled with his outstanding talent and cultivation, many female disciples in the academy had taken a fancy to him the moment he appeared. The Su Shihua that the girls usually saw was naturally elegant and confident. How could he be as cowardly as he was now, and even hugging his big brother Mo Shikong's leg and crying? The girls' expressions changed at the same time. They instinctively felt that they were really blind in the past. They actually wanted to hook up with this kind of person. Crown Princess. Mo Shikong took a deep breath and raised his hand to press his frowning brows. My brother acted rashly in this matter. But what should be punished has been punished, and what should be beaten has been beaten. Crown Princess, if you continue to be so overbearing, isn't it a little inexcusable? Mo Shikong. The young Crown Prince Consort had a cold expression on her face, so she directly called her by her full name. I gave you face time and time again because of Lian's mother. Don't think that your face is big enough to be able to point fingers in front of me time and time again. Mo Shikong only felt that his heart was slightly stifled. I gave you face and called you brother King Zheng. I didn't give you face. What can you do? The little crown princess kicked the long sword on the ground. I must kill Su Shihua today. Her ferocious gaze landed coldly on Mo Shikong. She instantly turned hostile and said ruthlessly, it's useless for anyone to stop me. Who dares to stop me? Mo Shikong slightly clenched his fists after hearing Mo Shikong's shout. The scene became very stiff in an instant. Everyone was baffled and stood there in silence. Even the onlookers felt the cold wind blowing and couldn't help but take a few steps back. Perhaps even Lady Qiao Qiao herself did not realize that once she was truly angered, everyone would become listless. Even Qi Xianxian and the others who were familiar with her were trembling in fear and did not dare to open their mouths if she wanted to slaughter Su Shihua, then Su Shihua would have to lie down and obediently wait to be slaughtered. For a moment, the entire courtyard fell into an awkward silence. Holy Sun Mi Yen is here. Outside the crowd, there came a small rustling murmur. Holy Sun Mi Yen, who was dressed in a holy white robe and cold and handsome, walked straight out from the middle of the separated crowd. Behind him were several priests in the same white robes, each holding a short walking stick in their hands. Everyone bowed to the holy son of the temple. Mi Yan's gaze landed coldly on Arbor. You can't kill him. Chapter 2957. The Crown Prince meant that if he continued to court death, he would think of a way to remove him from the position of King Zheng. Was he so much of an eyesore to the Crown Prince? Mo Shikong regained his senses and quickly ran towards the direction of the alchemy hall. Su Shihua was still alive. He could save him, he could definitely save him if his parents knew that Hua Di had died in the royal school like this. He wondered if they would cry until a hole appeared in the sky. When Mo Shikong thought of this, he couldn't help but secretly shudder. If Hua Di really died like this, then King Zheng's residence would never have a day of peace. Let's not talk about how King Zheng, Mo Shikong, would go to the alchemy hall to beg the alchemists to save his brother. When Mo Lian carried his wife back to the room in the Donglin court, he kicked the door open and pulled his wife onto his lap. Without any explanation, he kissed her. He kissed the little girl until her somewhat dazed and unfocused eyes gradually became a little more focused. 2 red clouds quickly flew up on her small face. Only then did he slightly release the restraint, allowing her to take advantage of the situation to gasp for breath. When did they return to the court? Sir Jojo frowned and raised his little hand to block a certain someone's lips. What are you doing? Kissing my own wife, isn't it a matter of course? Mo Lian's handsome face was taut as he said seriously. Sir Jojo glanced at him and snorted. He would never admit that he almost suffocated to death just now. Why did you come back? It was all his fault that he didn't accompany her to cancel her leave. Everything was not going well. I was looking for the shadow guards to ask something. Before Sir Qiao Qiao could open her mouth to ask, Crown Prince Emo, upholding his wife's words as the truth of the heavens, spilled the beans and confessed everything in full detail. The night before we went to Yunxia Peak, I arranged for them to do something at Xia Qi Garden. I left a trace of my soul and went to find Ming Yasi to fight that night. I asked them to cooperate with me. Yeah. In the end, he beat up Ming Yas so badly that he'll probably have to rest in bed for 2 to 3 days. You probably won't be seeing him for the next few days. Jojo stared at the man in front of him with his mouth agape. You beat him up? Yes. Emo Lien nodded and said with a look of disgust, it's a pity that this matter can only be carried out in secret. Even if we beat him up, we can't publicize it. Otherwise, not only will he suffer physical pain, his reputation will also be tarnished. The little fellow blinked his eyes and glanced at his exceptionally serious husband. He raised his little hand and touched his face. She suddenly reached out and hugged him, her little head swaying on his shoulder. Emo Lien, sometimes I wonder, what would I have done if I hadn't met you in this lifetime? She couldn't even think about it now. Just thinking about it made her heart ache. It felt like they had missed each other like this in their previous lives. Emo Lien was stunned. He hugged her tightly in his arms and slid his palm gently on her back. Even if it's 10,000 miles away, even if it's the 9 heavens, even if it's the Yellow Springs, it's still impossible to separate us. How is it possible that we haven't met? It's impossible. He hugged her soft body tightly and whispered in her ear. Impossible, Jojo murmured softly. She rested her head on his shoulder and remained silent for a long time. Jojo, can you promise me something? Emo Lien suddenly reached out and held her little face. He looked at her with a serious expression, his eyes shining brightly. Chapter 2958. In the future, when you feel that the night is coming and you can't see any stars, just look at me, okay? Arbor wanted to laugh, but looking at his serious expression, she couldn't laugh at all. Even when I'm not by your side, you can look at the star I gave you. He carelessly touched the bottom of her neck and took out the little star from her collar, letting her hold it in her hand. Jojo. He sighed softly and rested his forehead on her sweaty little head. I don't know what kind of suffering and torture you've experienced in the past. Maybe I'm powerless to change it. But I want you to remember one thing. In the future, no matter how dark the night is or how long the road is, you'll have me by your side. No matter what you want to do, just do it. He raised his hand and touched her little face. I'll support you with all my strength. Arbor pursed her little lips, tilted her little head, and burrowed into his embrace. Emo Lien, let's have a little Emo Lien. I think he'll be like you in the future. He'll be cute when he's young, sensible when he's older, and know how to dote on his mother. That's me. I think that's pretty good too. When the time comes, there'll be another person to dote on me. Sir Jojo thought so, but he didn't continue. After all, he was a jealous lotus. It was possible that he would even be jealous of his son. Prince Mo's hand, which was holding his little wife, instantly froze. He looked down. He saw his little beauty's little face under the flickering candlelight, swaying as if she wanted to say something. It was so captivating. It caused his originally pure mind to explode with a loud bang. It transformed into a colorful, enchanting, and gentle scenery. This was intolerable. He originally thought that since his little wife was still young, he would grit his teeth and endure it. When little Guizhi grew up, he would swallow her in one gulp. He didn't expect his wife to ask for it herself. If he could still endure it, he wouldn't be human. Wife, whatever you say is right. Prince Emo carried his wife up and quickly moved to the side of the bed. Do you want to have a drink first? Arbor had the urge to laugh. Why did she feel that her husband was so nervous that even his hands and feet were a little choppy? Do you want to drink to boost your courage? Mo Lien, how could he say that? He looked at his wife pitifully. After a while, he said, I'm not scared. Let's blow out the light. Mo Lien's, and the lights on the other end. Bang! 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 A series of knocks sounded from outside. Crown Prince Mo cursed inwardly. Just as her fingers were about to button up her coat, she heard the pounding on the door become louder and louder. Bang 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 bang. Bang 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 bang. Arbor silently lowered her little head. Prince Mo glanced at his little wife and said speechlessly, Baby, don't think that I can't see you snickering just because you're lowering your head. Arbor looked up. The smile on her face had already widened. This caused Crown Prince Mo's hand, which was holding the buttons of his outer robe, to pause slightly. Jojo. The Crown Prince was in a good mood now. He suddenly felt that the guy outside who was pounding on the door wasn't so annoying anymore. He moved to her side, took her little hand with a smile, and kissed it hard. Chapter 29:59. Nothing could compare to his Jojo's smile, which made people feel comfortable. Crown Prince Mo beamed as he gazed at his wifey. He leaned close to her and whispered, How regretful, wifey. Looking at the time, we won't be able to make little Mo Lien today. The audacious Lord Xiao Xiao was actually blushing because of a few words from him. She suddenly felt that she should tease him back a little. But before she could do anything. Bang! The people outside kicked the door open and rushed in one after another. Jojo, are you alright? Jojo. Qi Xian and the rest froze at the door. Looking at Crown Prince Mo and Sir Qiao Qiao, who were sitting in a row on the edge of the bed, their large hands clasped together as they gazed at each other, they felt like they had ruined someone else's happy occasion by foolishly barging in. Xiao Mu suppressed the smile on her lips and did her best to maintain an expressionless stoic face. What could happen to me? We've lost face in the academy. Little Fatty exclaimed. We were thinking, if we lost you as well. When the little fatty met Crown Prince Mo's gaze, he suddenly couldn't continue speaking. Cough cough. Actually, they were worried about Jojo. Jojo didn't look well just now and they were all worried to death. Now that they saw that the little girl's face was expressionless, but she was obviously much more energetic than before, they were relieved. Prince Mo was indeed worthy of his name. Luckily, he was here and managed to coax Miss Qiao back. Duan Muqing looked at the two of them deeply and smiled. Since Jojo is fine, let's gather at the plaza. Plaza. Something happened in the academy. Qi Xian wanted to walk up and hold Jojo's small arm, but seeing Prince Mo standing beside Jojo, she didn't dare to walk over. Sir Jojo jumped off the bed and held Mo Lien's hand as they walked towards the door. What happened? The academy is embarrassed. Embarrassed? That poor Qin Xiu is missing. His Highness Ming Bao from Ming Province is also missing. Everyone talked as they walked towards the plaza. When they arrived, they realized that the plaza was already surrounded by a large group of people. When Principal Yun and a group of teachers arrived, everyone silently shut their mouths and looked up at Principal Yun and his group walking up the stairs. The principal frowned deeply and looked at the students. He said loudly, I believe everyone knows what happened in the academy. Just now, the academy sent people to search the inner city but didn't find any traces of the two. I regret to inform you that student Qin Xiu and Ming Bao should have been abducted by unknown people. The academy's square immediately went into an uproar. Everyone was whispering to each other, and they couldn't stop themselves from getting excited. Principal, did someone sneak into our academy and abduct our students? The hothead who spoke asked the question on everyone's mind. If someone was really able to sneak into the royal school and abduct them, then this enemy shouldn't be an ordinary person. His or her cultivation should be on par with Principal Yun's. Principal Yun looked at the student who asked the question and shook his head. What we can confirm now is that the two students got lost in the inner city. Chapter 2960. Now, the Academy has issued an emergency level 4 mission. We're calling for everyone to go out and search for them. Those who can find their 2 classmates in 3 days will be able to go to the mission center to collect the mission points. A burly man could not help but laugh when he heard this. We're losing people from the Divine Continent and the Underworld region. Don't tell me they'll all be found by us from the Zhangzhou. The Crown Prince of the Zhangzhou, Rongli, could not help but frown as he glared at Ba Shu. This Ba Shu was loyal enough, but sometimes he seemed a little stupid. At this time, it was best not to speak, but he had to open his mouth to provoke the students from the Divine Continent and the Underworld region. As expected, Ba Shu's words immediately led to a war of words. Seeing that things were not going well, Principal Yun immediately raised his hands and gestured for everyone to keep quiet. Everyone quietly quieted down and focused their attention on Principal Yun. This emergency mission requires everyone to work together to complete it. After all, we've already sent so many people out, but in the inner city, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. We found nothing. The purpose of this mission is to motivate all the students from the 3 continents to take the initiative and participate. We hope that you can take this mission seriously. After all, since you've entered the academy, your status is only that of a student. There's no distinction between rich and poor. Today, you may be able to ignore your classmates going missing, or even losing their lives, but you don't know when this kind of tragedy will befall you. If you extend a helping hand to others today, you'll receive help from others in the future. I hope you understand. Yes. The group of students shouted in unison. Even if they were not going for the mission points, they could not let others step on the heads of the royal school students and behave atrociously. Qin cultivator student went to the inner city to buy zither strings. Ming Bao seemed to be going to the inner city to buy something too. Both of them went missing on the same day. Could they have been kidnapped by the same person? The students started to discuss enthusiastically as they discussed forming teams to search for the 2 students in the inner city. Qi Xianxian glanced at Arbor. Jojo, are we going? She knew that Jojo had never been on good terms with the Qin family. As for that Ming Bao, he did not have much contact with him either. However, since they had the same surname as Dark Yas, they were most likely from the same family. Arbor considered for a moment, then nodded and said, since it's a mission from the academy, then we'll take it and walk around the inner city. They were just doing their best. After all, the inner city was so big. One more patrol team wouldn't make much of a difference. Even if she didn't get along with the people from the Qin estate, there was nothing wrong with the academy assigning her a mission. Moreover, she had briefly interacted with that 5th young Master Qin in the medical field, so she knew that this person was very fussy and didn't want to have too much personal contact with him. However, this was only a mission. Since all the students had accepted the challenge, their Seacombe Planet battle team wouldn't do that special treatment and would just accept the challenge. As for whether or not he could find it, that was another matter altogether. Qi Xianxian, on the other hand, was quite happy. She had accepted a mission and was going to take a stroll around the inner city. Who knows, maybe they would be lucky enough to meet these 2 students and complete a level 4 mission. How great would that be? Chapter 2961. How could Arbor know that the little lass was harboring this kind of hoping to get lucky mentality? After accepting the mission, they followed the large group of students and walked out of the academy. It was already dusk, and the oncoming wind was neither too fast nor too slow. Although it was a bit chilly, it wasn't bone-piercing cold. After all, they were about to enter April, and the season of blooming flowers was about to arrive. Arbor walked next to Mo Lien and felt the warmth in his palm as he held her hand. Mo Lian's physique was of the fire attribute, and she herself possessed a sacred fire. His hand was dry and warm all year round, so she especially liked it. Unlike her, her legs were always a bit cold, and when she was nervous, her palms would turn cold and damp, making her feel uncomfortable. Mo Lian reached out to pinch the little fellow's soft little face. "Chow chow, how about we split into 3 teams to search the city since there are about 10 of us?" Right, 3 to 4 people in a team. We have to move faster, and we should be able to search the inner city before nightfall." Qi Xianxian quickly nodded and said. Arbor glanced at the little lass and silently twitched his mouth. Xianxian shouldn't be having some strange thoughts, such as, perhaps our team can complete this level 4 mission, or, in terms of luck, I only believe in my JoJo, and so on. The little stoic opened her mouth. "Xianxian, we're just out for a routine stroll." She didn't need to be so proactive. In any case, there were plenty of proactive people. There were at least several hundred people who wanted to save 5th young Master Qin from this abyss of suffering, one after the other. After all, the benefits of being on good terms with the Qin estate were innumerable. Qi Xianxian quickly said, "Jojo, don't doubt luck. I keep feeling that we'll run into each other." "Where did you get this absurd confidence from?" Arbor cast her a speechless glance, then didn't bother to continue speaking. Qi Xianxian arranged for the teams to be split into 3 teams, purposely leaving Prince Mo and Arbor in one team. After receiving Crown Prince Mo's admiring gaze, she laughed heartily and ran off with her teammates. Arbor couldn't help but shake his head in amusement. He turned to Mo Lian and said, "Let's find a tea house and sit down." Whether or not he could find the zither cultivator and the underworld leopard was not that important to Arbor. In any case, if they were still in the inner city, they would definitely not be able to leave for the time being. After all, the dean had ordered the city to be sealed the moment the 2 students were confirmed to be missing. Right now, not to mention a person, even a fly would not be able to fly out of Wind Thunder City. Oh no, oh no. A cannibalistic barrier appeared at the end of West Street again and swallowed the children. A loud voice exploded in their ears. They saw that the passers-by and the uncles and aunties who had set up their stalls all raised their carrying poles and rushed towards this person with sticks in their hands. "What? Where is it? Where is it? Take us there. Everyone, be careful. This man-eating enchantment was very fierce. We've already gone to Ethereal Peak to ask Principal Yun for help. As long as Principal Yun is willing to descend the mountain, he will definitely be able to get rid of this vile creature." Right, there must be a demon causing mischief. It can't be a ghost, right? No matter who it is, in any case, we must eradicate it completely this time. Master Silver, Little Four is nearby. Qiuqiu's sudden words made Arbor's brows twitch uncontrollably. What man-eating enchantment, it couldn't have been that little rascal's doing, right? Today ended at 10:00 p.m. Fragmented Dreams. Chapter 2962. Sir Jojo hurriedly tugged at her husband's hand. "Lian, let's also go over and take a look." Mo Lian nodded and looked at her in confusion. "What is it?" Seeing the little fellow's serious expression, it seemed like something rather important had happened. Everything was fine just now. To put it bluntly, the disappearance of that fellow Hell Leopard and 5th Qin didn't have much to do with them. The little girl said expressionlessly, "Previously, I found Qiuqiu's treat seed fragment Little 4 in the heaven-level testing steel on Main Academy Street." Arbor took a deep breath. It ran away. Later, because there were too many things to do, she didn't remember to go look for this little fellow. She didn't expect it to stir up trouble in the inner city. It really deserved a beating. Mo Lian couldn't help but laugh. The cannibalistic inner world that those city residents were talking about just now. It should be its doing. The little girl nodded her little head resentfully. This little fellow was seriously too mischievous. The two hurried in the direction of West Main Street as they spoke. There were already quite a few people standing there. Older brothers and uncles carrying hoes followed the crowd as they searched for the missing child. But how could a few dozen trifling ordinary people detect something like a barrier? When Arbor arrived at West Main Street, she also sensed a trace of familiar energy fluctuation. Knowing that it was the fragment Little Four playing tricks, she hurriedly tugged at Mo Lien's hand and pulled him into a detour into an alley. At this time, West Main Street had already attracted a large number of people. Many Royal Academy students also hurried over when they heard that something had happened here. Arbor didn't want to attract attention. This Little Four was so mischievous, so she had to take this little fellow away before anyone discovered it. The two entered the back alley and didn't sense anything special at first. But after walking for a short while, they both stopped and looked at each other. Although the surroundings don't seem to have changed, it's very obvious that we've already unknowingly walked into a barrier, Mo Lien said with a smile. Can't Qiuqiu sense the movement trajectory of fragments? Summon it out and lead the way. Xiao Mu nodded and summoned Qiuqiu. As soon as the little tray ant came out, it somersaulted twice and climbed onto Xiao Mu's shoulder before plopping down on its butt. It panted as it said, "Master, this matter is a bit difficult to handle." What is it? This fourth child must have developed some intelligence and has its own thoughts. The little tray ant drooped its black bean-like eyes in distress. It stretched out a branch and scratched its head in distress. What if it really doesn't want to return to its original position? The sapling glanced at the little Master Silver worriedly and muttered, "Qiuqiu can only grow into a towering tree if we gather all the missing fragments." When it said this, Qiuqiu looked up at the sky again and put on a sad but bright little tree face. Arbor was speechless for a while. He raised his hand and stroked the leaves on its head. It will come back. Hurry up and sense its location. Qiuqiu lifted 2 leaves and pointed in front. Arbor wanted to reach out and grab her husband's hand, but grabbed nothing. She couldn't help but be secretly alarmed. She turned her head and shouted, "Lien." Mo Lien was also annoyed at this time. He also wanted to grab his wifey's hand as he spoke, but didn't manage to do so. Only then did he realize that he had fallen into Little Four's trap. Chapter 2963. Looking around, he realized that he was no longer in the dark alley. Instead, there were many tall and lush trees growing around him. Suddenly, one of the tree vines that was hanging behind him moved. It moved very quickly, like a dancing black snake. With 2 whooshing sounds, it wrapped itself around Mo Lien's arm. Mo Lien raised the Raven Moon sword in her hand. She hesitated for a moment before slashing down. Within the tree shadow enchantment that Little Four had set up, if she destroyed it recklessly, it would definitely cause harm to Little Four. This tree seed fragment was a part of Little Ball. It would be bad if it was damaged, but if it wasn't, she wouldn't be able to leave for the time being. Mo Lien felt a headache coming on. Looking at the tree vines that were wantonly attacking her, she leapt and dodged. "Lien!" Sir Jojo quickly ran a few feet forward. His little face instantly darkened. "Little Four, come out." "Master, don't worry about the great Crown Prince. He will be fine." The great Crown Prince's martial prowess was no joke. If Little Four insisted on seeking death, Little Ball secretly ridiculed in its heart. It could only light a candle for him. When spring came next year, it would burn some paper at his grave. "Master, it's not far ahead. Chase." With Little Ball's howl, Arbor inexplicably increased its speed and rushed towards the direction it was pointing at. From afar, they could only see a towering tree standing in front of them. Under the tree, there was a large hollowed-out lounge chair with golden flowers. On it lay a fat baby wearing a big red doudou. 17 or 18 children, ranging in age from 5 to 8 years old, were eagerly surrounding the chubby baby, serving him tea and water as they called out, "Your Majesty." "Great King, have a banana. Great King, drink some water. Don't choke. Great King, are you hot? Do you want me to give you a fan or something? As Arbor approached, he heard these children flattering the Great King. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. What was going on? She subconsciously glanced at the expressionless Qiuqiu from the corner of her eye. No emotion could be seen in Qiuqiu's two bean-like bright eyes. However, Arbor knew that Qiuqiu's heart must be crumbling right now. Cough. Arbor pulled the little tray ant off his shoulder and put it on his arm. Qiuqiu, I didn't expect you to have such a dark heart. So you've always wanted to be the Great King of the mountain. Raise a group of little brothers and sisters to serve you. No wonder you enslaved Little Water and Little Earth. It turns out that you are subconsciously a great king of mountains. Several leaves rushed up to block Arbor's little mouth. Qiuqiu only felt that its small tree face was about to burst into flames. It was about to be angered to death by this brainless fat baby in front of it. What was wrong with Fragment Little 4? It created such a frightening barrier and kidnapped so many children from the city just to make these children its subordinates. Bandits. Bandits. Shameless. Qiuqiu couldn't help but curse at this brainless fragment in its heart. Hey! Why aren't you kneeling in front of this great king? The fat baby suddenly straightened up and spoke in a childish voice. Arbor had an inexplicable urge to burst out laughing. Fortunately, she was used to her stoic face, so she restrained her laughter. Chapter 2964. Kneel. Meet this great king. The chubby baby coiled his two short legs that resembled lotus roots and looked at Arbor seriously. His gaze landed on the sapling Qiuqiu's tanned face. You still dare to pull a long face in front of this great king? You, go up and pluck off the hair on his head. Yes, great king. A wimpy child beside him immediately responded. He rolled up his sleeves and stomped up a few steps. Arbor's mouth twitched. She really didn't want to bully a baby. But the other person had already rolled up his sleeves to snatch Qiuqiu from her arm. If she didn't do anything, wouldn't she be too cowardly? Arbor expressionlessly picked up that wimpy child and watched him kick his legs in the air like a fish that suddenly lost its water supply and found it hard to breathe. Then, he burst into tears with a wah. The little stoic's face instantly darkened, and her head swelled. The little fat child with the red doo-doo was infuriated, and he leaped down from the large recliner at once. His small, chubby feet were bare as he ran toward Xiaomu, smacking his lips. The sapling Qiuqiu raised two leaves to cover its black beady eyes. It felt that the Fragment Little 4 in front of it was practically unbearable to look at. How could this guy be so stupid? He was actually butt naked. This child couldn't have been sealed inside the testing monolith for hundreds to thousands of years and turned stupid, right? Woman, how dare you? The chubby baby shouted as he looked up at Arbor with his arms akimbo. If this guy could grow a bit taller, perhaps he would be a bit more imposing. But now Arbor rolled his eyes and directly flung out a vine from his sleeve. He grabbed that wimpy child and hung him up like a dumpling before dragging him in front of him. Where did you take my Lien? Hurry and let him out. The chubby baby widened his round black eyes and stared pitifully at Arbor. He then turned around to look at Qiuqiu and suddenly wailed, Big brother, save me, big brother. Qiuqiu speechlessly raised its hand to cover its eyes. Arbor reached out and flicked its chubby head. Shut up. I think you've become bold, even daring to kidnap people. Don't you know that other people's families will worry when you kidnap them to play? Arbor slapped its chubby paw twice in exasperation at its failure to meet his expectations. How are you going to clean this up now? Big brother, Fragment number 4 said pitifully, can you ask this big sister to stop hitting me? Big. Call her master. Xiaomu and Qiuqiu roared at it one after another. Fragment number 4 lowered its head like a little quail. Before it could even open its mouth, it was already tearing up. Little mistress, what do you think we should do? Big brother, can you fuse me in later? Get to the point. Chio roared at it with great vigor. I don't have any ill intentions towards them, Fragment number 4 stuttered. Fragment number 4 stuttered. Tears fell from his eyes as he howled miserably, I am madam. I really want to find someone to play with me for a while. I didn't harm them. I even gave them good food and drinks. But you still can't kidnap them, Arbor glared at it in annoyance. Before he could continue lecturing it, he frowned slightly. Chapter 2965. In the next instant, the little monk who was making a fuss was released. Once the little baldy was released, he ran to the little fat boy with the red undergarment and said, Amitba. He stretched out his white and tender hands and rubbed Fragment little 4's head. Benefactor, this little monk understands you very well. Arbor was speechless. Actually, it's because you're too lonely that you did such a foolish thing. The little fat boy with the red undergarment on his butt sobbed and suddenly stopped crying. He raised his head and looked at the little monk who had a compassionate expression and was enveloped in Buddhist light. Little master. The little fat boy cried loudly and threw himself into the little monk's arms. The little monk sighed and said, the world is empty and bitter, and everything is impermanent. The past is gone, and people must always look to the future. Little benefactor, don't be too sad. Arbor pressed his aching head and carried the little monk over and placed him under the tree. He then carried the little fat boy with the red undergarment over and placed him under the tree as well. I beg of you, don't cry. Arbor pulled Chio from his arm and placed him on the ground. He stared at Fragment number 4 with a serious expression. Little 4, you knew who we were the moment you came out from the testing monument, right? Fragment little 4 shivered and nodded his head timidly. The little brats around them were not going to let it go. They kept calling him Great King and wanted to rebel and attack Sir Jojo. What a joke, how could they let their great king lower his head and admit defeat in front of a girl? They had to fight. Arbor was speechless as he looked at the little brats who were swarming towards him. He couldn't hit them and couldn't be bothered to scold them. He simply controlled the dosage and sprinkled the sleeping powder on them, dong 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 dong. The little brats fell in a circle and the world finally quieted down. Arbor heaved a sigh of relief from the bottom of his heart. Fragment little 4 looked at his little brothers nervously, then looked up at the little girl bitterly. Master Silver, what did you do to them? Miss Chiao had a good sense of propriety. The dosage of the sleeping powder was very light. At most, it would only make the children sleep for 15 minutes. It would not have any effect on their bodies. Therefore, if she wanted to do something, she had to do it within these 15 minutes. Otherwise, her head would explode again. Little 4, you must listen to me now. Immediately return to Paradise Planet with Chio. Seeing that the chubby kid was about to cry again, Arbor pinched his chubby cheeks. No matter what you do, I will respect your decision. Since you've already gained sentience, you should have your own thoughts. But you have to think carefully. Arbor patted him on the head. If you don't return to your original body, you'll always be like this. You'll never grow up again. Without this fragment, little 4 was only missing a small part to him. His growth would be slower in the future. But this seed fragment it would forever remain in the form of a child. It would be impossible for it to grow for thousands of years. Fragment little 4 sobbed and said pitifully, I didn't think that I won't come back. I just want to play for a while more. After being accidentally sealed in the test monument in the middle of nowhere, little 4 had always wanted to come out. Chapter 2966. Once it escaped, its little mentality was that it didn't want to be fused with Big Brother so quickly. He really wanted to chase back the hundreds of years of time that had been sealed, and then find someone to play with it for a few days. Woo-woo, it was that simple. Arbor picked him up and flicked his little head. Alright, Chucho didn't say that it was going to fuse with you immediately. As for you, you can play for as long as you want, but you can't kidnap people anymore in the future. If you want to play with them, then work hard to become their little friends. Instead of using the methods of bandits to kidnap them. The little chubby child nodded his little head as if he understood. Where's my Lien? The little fellow's face was stiff as he asked without batting an eyelid. The little chubby child weakly pointed at his fingers. He's so bad, he almost chopped me to death. If this man hadn't stopped at the last moment, it would probably have been injured and unable to continue maintaining the barrier in front of it. Arbor and the little chubby child looked at each other. So. I threw him out before. Fragment Little 4 said immediately. Threw him out of my bounded domain. Out far away. Out far away, at least he wouldn't be able to find him so quickly. What a scary guy. He now understood a little why that man suddenly stopped and didn't try to destroy his barrier. It must be because that man suddenly remembered that he and Big Brother were of the same bloodline. If he hurt him, he would hurt Big Brother, which would then affect his own little master. That terrifying man had only let him go for the sake of his little mistress. Arbor really wanted to smack this little fellow's butt, but he gritted his teeth and held it in. At the side, Chucho didn't care so much and directly pulled out a vine and smacked the little chubby child's butt. He snorted and said, "You're not too stupid. You guessed correctly. Crown Prince didn't attack you for Master's sake. Otherwise, with your small body, do you think you can withstand 3 moves from others? Hurry and return to Paradise Planet with me, don't cause trouble for Master anymore. Master still has to clean up this mess for you. You're really worrying people to death. After a few hundred years, you've grown old but not wise. Why are you so foolish?" The sapling activated its nagging mode and stretched out a branch to grab Fragment Little 4, pulling him back to Paradise Planet. Another branch stretched out and wrapped around the little monk's waist without warning, causing the little monk's mumbling of, "This little monk can walk on his own," to disappear into the air. Arbor pressed his small head with a headache and glanced at the bear cubs lying on the ground. With a wave of his hand, he led the group of children out of the barrier and back into the alley. She flicked a pebble from her fingertips and it landed on the wall with a "pa" sound. Then she disappeared without a trace. Very quickly, the alley was filled with students from the royal school. The leader of the group was Wu Huanxiu, the beautiful princess. She saw a dozen children lying in the alley and couldn't help but cry out in surprise, "It's the children. Come and see. Is he your child?" His voice was like a candle that had been lit, instantly attracting all the citizens in the city. Meanwhile, the little stoic had already gone far away. Following the sapling's guidance, she chased in the direction of Mo Lien's aura. Just as she came out from behind the alley, she narrowly bumped into a coarse woman with a fierce-looking face. "I'm going to sleep, it's too late." Chapter 2967. The woman scowled and was about to curse, but when she looked up and saw her, it was as if she had suddenly seen a ghost. She hastily lowered her head and shrunk her neck as she walked towards the side door. When the woman stealthily walked to the door and closed it, she didn't forget to sneak a glance at Arbor. She was almost scared out of her wits by what she saw. She saw that Miss Qiao really was like a ghost as she stood in front of the side door. The woman's heart almost stopped from fright when she met Xiao Mu's cold and desolate eyes through the door crack that wasn't very wide. Bang! The woman forcefully closed the door with both hands and hastily fastened the latch. Afterwards, she panted heavily for air and subconsciously raised her sleeve to wipe the cold sweat on her forehead before slowly turning around. She then widened her eyes in horror as she looked at Arbor, who was standing in front of her and staring at her expressionlessly. Bang! The woman's legs turned to jelly from fright, and she leaned against the door, almost collapsing on the ground. Barely propping herself up, the woman trembled as she leaned against the door. She looked in horror at the little stoic in front of her and stammered, "Miss, trespassing into other people's homes, what are you doing? You know me?" The woman hurriedly shook her head like a rattledrum. "You don't know me, but you look like you've seen a ghost." Arbor's eyes revealed this meaning, but he didn't feel like speaking. However, the woman clearly wasn't a smart person like Mo Lien or Duan Yu. She simply couldn't understand the little girl's gaze. She shuddered as she moved closer to the door. She stammered, "Since you, miss, if there's nothing else, please leave first." Arbor glanced at her suspiciously. He looked at her several times until the woman's heart was about to leap out of her chest. Humph. The little girl pursed her lips in boredom and turned around to pass through the inner wall. This time, the woman finally saw clearly. No wonder this little girl was like a ghost and silently stood behind her. It turned out that she had passed through the estate's wall. Startled, the woman hurriedly got up and ran towards the inner court. "Madam, madam, madam." The middle-aged woman ran to the entrance of the inner courtyard and stood there, repeatedly calling inside. The door to the side room was pushed open with a creak, and a pretty maid with a round face walked out from inside. She glared at the biddy and said impatiently, "Why are you shouting outside the door? Don't you know that madam is busy? This old servant has something important to report to madam. I'll have to trouble Miss Kai Hui to inform them." The round-faced Pan girl, Kai Hui, couldn't help but sneer when she heard this. "If you have something to say, just say it to me. Madam doesn't have so much free time to see a doorkeeper like you. What's with the noise?" A woman with a snow-white complexion and slender fingers walked out of the house. Beside her was a muscular man with a bare upper body. The biddy blushed slightly, and she promptly knelt down and saluted, "Greetings, madam. This old servant has something important to report to madam." This old servant saw the crown princess just now. The originally indifferent madam of the State Security Bureau was abruptly startled, and her entire body tensed up reflexively. "What did you say? Who did you see?" Chapter 2968. The Crown Princess, the old woman hurriedly said. Then, she glanced at Madame Gohan fawningly and said with a grin, "But don't worry, madam. This old servant has already sent that little crown princess away." "How did you send her away?" Madame Gohan sized her up suspiciously. The stoic-faced crown princess wasn't that easy to send away. Madame Gohan vigilantly had the man beside her use his spiritual perception to search the surroundings. After confirming that there were no strangers lurking nearby, she sighed in relief. "You did very well." Madame Gohan nodded. "Kai Hui, give her 5 spirit coins as a tip." "Yes." The old maidservant took the reward and left while thanking her profusely. She even thought to herself, "Fortunately, I saw that portrait in Madame's court before. That's how I recognized this stoic-faced young crown prince consort at a glance." Speaking of which, she had only caught a glimpse of her from afar. At that time, Madame was throwing iron darts in the small court, and there was a portrait hanging on the target. Later on, she secretly asked the old woman in the same area and learned who the portrait was. Fortunately, she had a good memory. If she continued to tangle with the little stoic crown princess, who knew what would happen in the future? Perhaps it would really arouse the suspicion of this stoic-faced crown princess, and she would come in to investigate regardless. If she ruined Madame's plans because of her, Madame definitely wouldn't easily forgive her. That old woman cracked a smile and continuously tossed a spirit coin in her hand as she left with a chuckle. However, she didn't know that not long after she left, a person appeared on the treetop. Arbor knitted his small brows tightly and raised his hand to scratch his small head. In truth, she originally didn't want to meddle in this matter, but she didn't expect Xuanxuan's crow's beak really hit the nail on the head. She had worn out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it without any effort. Judging from Madame Gowen's sneaky behavior, she definitely didn't do anything good. Perhaps the Qin family's fifth young master and Ming Bao were abducted by this Madame Gowen. No one knew when she came to the Wind Thunder City. Her whereabouts were quite strange. She actually managed to hide from the Crown Prince's spies outside the Wind Thunder City. Arbor didn't know that the Madam of the National Security Agency had deliberately disguised herself before setting off for the Wind Thunder City. She kept a very low profile along the way and didn't cause any commotion. The carriage she used was also very simple. She didn't even use the main entrance when she left the imperial capital. If it weren't for the old woman's guilty conscience and dodging after seeing the arbor, she wouldn't have aroused Miss Chiao's suspicion. Speaking of which, it was quite strange. Why did this Madam of the National Security Agency come to the Wind Thunder City instead of being a proper wife in the imperial capital? Did she catch fifth young Master Qin on the spur of the moment, or did she come here specially? This small courtyard was not very big, so Arbor only casually walked around the courtyard and found the fifth young master tied to the bed in a small room. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Mr. Jojo wouldn't have known that the Madam of the National Security Agency had such a weird hobby. She liked to tie men up on the bed. What kind of hobby was this? Arbor glanced through the window and saw that the fifth young master's expression seemed to be in extreme pain. It was obvious that he had been drugged. Miss Chiao blinked and associated it with the previous incident where she treated the fifth young master. Could it be that the filthy aphrodisiac powder was also administered by this talented Madam of the National Security Agency? Chapter 2969. Sir Jojo floated in through the window and silently arrived beside the large bed. Looking at Qin Xiu's pained appearance for a long while, he seemed to have thought of something and raised his head slightly. He felt a light bulb flash through his mind. Oh! No wonder Madame Guo of the Goan Madam called out young Sir Qin on the spot at the palace banquet last time when she gave her a beautiful dream. As it turned out, she was thinking of this fifth young Sir Qin back then. That wasn't right either. The little girl tilted her head and associated it with Madame Guo of the Goan Madam's disgraceful behavior back then. It seemed like she was doing something with several Qin young Sir Qin, not just fooling around with this fifth young Sir Qin in the fantasy realm. This Madame Guo of the Goan Madam wasn't afraid of dying from a loss of blood. When the little stoic thought of this, she couldn't resist pursing her lips in disdain. Fifth young Sir Qin abruptly opened his eyes, which were brimming with bloodlust and hatred. When his gaze landed on the little stoic, he was instantly dumbfounded. He thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, so he opened his eyes with all his might. When he discovered that expressionless stoic face was still standing at the head of her bed and looking at him, he couldn't resist saying hoarsely, "Save, save me, save. Save me. 1,000,000 spirit coins and a stalk of tearless grass." The little stoic didn't have any extra expression on her face, and her tone was indifferent, as if she was making a deal with him. Fifth young Sir Qin was slightly taken aback, and then he nodded with all his might with reddened eyes. Arbor replied with an "oh" before reaching out to pull him up from the bed. The dagger in her palm directly chopped off several ropes binding him. Her movements were extremely rough, without the slightest regard for whether a person without any cultivation could withstand her strength. Qin Xiu couldn't describe his feelings. He actually knew from the start that this stoic face was a heartless and cold-blooded person. Back then, the reason why she saved him was because Physician Chang repeatedly begged her and even offered a large sum of money. Arbor lowered her head to glance at this fifth young sir before swaggering outside while carrying him. "You were poisoned with 8 types of X drugs last time. Was it the Ministry of the Goans doing?" Fifth young Sir Qin's expression was rather indignant. He was a grown man, yet he was being held in her hands like a little chick. Not to mention that he couldn't get over his embarrassment, he couldn't bear it mentally either. Moreover, her extremely puzzled expression was a little glaring. He didn't believe that Ling Gu wouldn't have told her the truth when she saved him in Langfang previously. How could he have never mentioned the name of the Madam of the National Security Agency? It was obvious that she had forgotten. Or perhaps it should be said that she didn't take the matter of saving him, Fifth Qin, to heart at all. After she was done, she completely forgot about him. Seeing that he pursed his lips and didn't speak, Arbor didn't bother to ask anymore. Anyway, her relationship with the Qin family was just like that. The Qin family's fifth young master was a good-for-nothing. If he had the ability, he might be as bad as his second brother. Arbor felt annoyed as he carried him. When he exited the room, he coincidentally bumped into Madam of the National Security Agency. Madame Goen was so nervous that her whole body trembled. She subconsciously hid behind the strong man beside him. Subsequently, she felt that her cowardice was truly a bit outrageous. Why are you here? Madame Goen's voice resounded in the small courtyard. You're trespassing on private property. Arbor. Arbor sneered at her. If you're unconvinced, come fight me. Madame Goen instantly retreated several steps. Chapter 2970. Fuck. Madame Goen repeatedly cursed in her heart. However, when she recalled that damnable ugliness at the palace banquet last time, which caused her to not dare to leave the house for more than half a month, she inexplicably felt apprehensive when she saw Arbor now. This lass was truly sinister, so she really didn't dare to confront her directly again. Arbor, I am warning you. Madame Goen inwardly shuddered and couldn't resist scolding. You immediately put him down. Let's go our separate ways. Hurry and leave, I'll treat it as if I never saw you. Before Madame Goen could finish her sentence, she was startled by Arbor, who suddenly flashed forward, and hastily retreated several steps. How can you be so shameless? Arbor expressionlessly looked at her and said, Fifth young Sir Qin doesn't seem to like you, so why do you keep pestering him? Madame Goen was so angry that her face flushed red, and she couldn't resist roaring, What the hell do you know? He's already mine now. Fifth young Sir is just shy by nature and isn't good at expressing himself. Arbor instantly loosened his grip, and Fifth young Sir felt like he was a pile of trash that the little girl threw away. When she peeked at him, it was as if she was looking at a pile of dirt, and she even hastily took out a small white handkerchief from her pocket to wipe her hands. Humiliation and anger instantly flashed past Fifth young Sir's eyes, and he exerted all his strength to move his limp limbs, but he felt powerless all over. Don't listen to her nonsense. Fifth young Sir couldn't help but panic when he saw the little girl's cold expression and how she was about to leave. He reached out to grab a ribbon on her skirt and struggled with all his might. She's talking nonsense. I don't know what the hell you two are doing. The little girl looked impatient and disinclined to care. You guys settle it yourselves. She still had to hurry and find her Lien, so how could she have the leisure to fool around with this bunch of idlers? Why you can't cough. I was caught by her. She caught me. Why you clearly know. Fifth young Master Qin was so infuriated that his entire body was trembling. He was infuriated at this young lady's aloofness and decisiveness, and he was also infuriated that he didn't have any cultivation and was just a piece of trash. He was like a fish on a chopping block, waiting to be slaughtered. Wah! He was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood, which formed a dark red puddle on the ground. The little stoic halted her steps and lowered her head to glance at him. When she saw that this person was truly so infuriated that his entire body was trembling, she couldn't help but pace back and forth in irritation. In the end, she still felt apologetic, so she bounced back and picked up the fifth young master again. The little stoic expressionlessly shouted at Madame Gua, "Scram!" Madame Goen was furious and couldn't help but curse, "Stoic face, do you really think I'm afraid of you? Men!" As soon as Madame Goen gave the order, 4 or 5 people who looked like secret guards immediately flew behind her. Arbor glanced at her and snorted. You think you can stop me with just a few small fries? Aren't you too naive? What big words! Madame Gohan sneered coldly, take him down. Be careful of her poison. Arbor tossed fifth young Sir Chin to the side again and summoned that black feral from his conscious. Several small blue flames whizzed in the direction of the secret guards. Chapter 2971. A little spiritual master dares to be so arrogant in front of us. Before she could finish her sentence, one of the blue spiritual cleansing flames burned in front of Madame Gohan. Madame Gohan was enraged, and she waved her sleeve, wanting to brush away that leaping blue spiritual cleansing flame. However, that flame suddenly emitted sparks in front of her, and the intensity of the fire instantly soared. Caught off guard, Madame Gohan jumped in fright. Fortunately, that robust man beside her was sharp-sighted and nimble, pulling her into his embrace and using his muscular arm to block that blue spiritual cleansing flame. Arbor focused her gaze and saw that black spirit armor had formed on that man's arm. The blue spiritual cleansing flame couldn't burn through this man's spirit armor and only wrapped around the outer layer for a few seconds before quietly vanishing. Madame Gohan was unable to restrain her anger. She was a level 12 great spiritual master, but she was always so defeated in front of this little girl. This little girl clearly looked like a low-level little spiritual master, so why did she feel like her attacks were so swift and fierce? She couldn't help but feel a bit vindictive. Her desire to kill this little girl grew stronger and stronger. She was calculating. If she could kill this brat here without anyone noticing, she would be able to do so. It shouldn't be to the extent of being immediately discovered by the crown prince, right? As long as she acted quickly, ruthlessly, and accurately, she could send people to clean up the traces here afterwards. Madame Gohan's gaze was ruthless and gloomy as she stared at Arbor and said word by word, immediately scram from this courtyard and treat it as if nothing happened, and I can still let you off. Fifth young Master Chin, who had been thrown to the ground by the little girl, couldn't stop trembling. He had already prepared for the worst, which was that the little girl would throw him away without a second word. In that case, he would have no way to survive. Rather than being humiliated by this hateful old woman, he might as well show his sincerity by dying. Miss Chiao responded to Madame Gohan's words by slapping her across the air. This was simply fucking awesome. Fifth young Master Chin, who had fallen to the ground, looked at Miss Chiao in a daze. Then, he barely supported his limp body and crawled back a few steps. What a joke. When has my Arbor ever retreated without a fight? Sir Jojo's heart also burned with true fury. She couldn't be more clear about Madame Gohan's gaze. This woman actually had killing intent towards her. Since that was the case, why should she be polite and talk nonsense with her? Just kill them. At this time, the anger and resentment in Gohan's heart had reached its peak. That slap just now had really made her lose all her face. With the new and old hatred added together, the anger in Gohan's heart burned fiercely. If he didn't do it, he would go all the way. He hardened his heart and shouted angrily, "What are you all standing there for? Get rid of this bitch right now." Everyone looked at each other and hesitated for a moment. They were well aware of the true identity of the little girl in front of them. Get rid of the crown princess. It felt good to make a move now, but what about after that? After the crown princess was taken care of, would things really end like this? After the crown prince lost his beloved wife, what terrible things would he do? When the time came, who would bear the consequences? One of the secret guards took a deep breath, cupped his hands and said to Madam, please reconsider. Now that His Highness the Crown Prince had the Purple Forest Guard in his hands on the surface, who knew how many forces he had in secret? Could he easily act as he pleased? If the Crown Princess lost a strand of hair, His Highness the Crown Prince probably wouldn't take things lying down. Chapter 2972. Gohan was usually a coward, but she was too angry today. She was so angry that she wanted to shed all pretense of cordiality with Arbor. Now that she was reminded by the secret guard, she also felt a little regretful. But the order had already been given. If she repeated it in 3 seconds, would she still want her face as Madame Gohan? She turned her head and glared at the secret guard in front of her fiercely and shouted angrily, "Are you not even going to listen to my orders?" There was a hint of threat in her fierce eyes. Their lives were firmly in her hands. Don't forget that when they became secret guards, they had all handed over a wisp of their life souls to her. This also meant that no matter how high these people achieved in the future and how far they could go, even if they broke through the deity realm or even reached the transcendent realm, they would still only be her servants. She held all of their lives in her hands. If she wanted them to live, they would live. If she wanted them to die, they would die. This was no joke. Although the secret guard's face was covered, his body stiffened slightly. Madame Gohan looked at them with a smug expression. "Why aren't you attacking?" The 5 secret guards surrounded Arbor and gritted their teeth. They could only accept the order and go forward to besiege her. Each of them summoned a large spirit beast beside them and pounced over without any explanation. Arbor's expression was calm. There was no anger. They were just serving their own masters. Since these people were working for Madame Gohan, they naturally accepted her orders immediately. However, since they chose to attack her, she was not a good-natured person. She would show mercy and let them go. Since they were standing on the opposite side, then it was either you die or you die. Arbor looked coldly at these secret guards who had summoned their spirit beasts and rushed forward. She muttered, "Rustle, rustle." The soil under her feet immediately rolled up. For a moment, the ground that was originally paved with bricks bulged up. With that, a giant pincer suddenly emerged from the ground and snapped the neck of one of the spirit beasts. The secret guard who was closely related to this spirit beast did not understand what was going on at that time. He felt a surge of pain in his consciousness and spat out a mouthful of blood. His complexion also withered. Everyone's hearts were filled with shock. What kind of monster was this? It killed a spirit beast as soon as it appeared. What a powerful combat strength. The giant sand scorpion's huge head popped out from under the tumbling rocks. It waved its pincers and swept towards the limbs of a spirit beast next to it. The spirit beast was clearly frightened by its imposing manner. It spread its 4 hooves and cried out in alarm as it hurriedly ran out of the small courtyard. Arbor stared coldly at the people in front of him. He waved his hand and smirked. Everyone only heard rustling sounds coming from all directions, and an inexplicable sense of foreboding arose in their hearts. "What is it?" Madame Gohan couldn't help but cry out, tightly clinging to the arm of the man beside her. "Scorpion, scorpion. There are so many scorpions." One of the hidden guards lost his composure and cried out in panic. Madame Gohan turned around to take a look. Goosebumps instantly appeared on her skin, and her scalp became slightly numb. Countless sand scorpions, each about the size of an adult's fist, crawled out of the small courtyard from all directions. 5th young Master Qin's scalp also exploded. He was still sitting on the ground right now. What if these scorpions couldn't differentiate between friend and foe? Chapter 2974. On top of that, he had been fed bone-softening powder and drugged with aphrodisiac earlier, so his body was already in a half-crippled state. Now, he couldn't even open a tiny medicine bottle. 5th young Master Qin subconsciously clenched his fist tightly, not even noticing that his fingers had left bloody marks on his palm. Arbor glanced at this person in a bad mood and muttered, "Troublesome, again." The little fellow walked up and bent down to snatch that medicine bottle from his hand. She directly pulled out the cork and squatted next to him. She turned his flushed face around with one hand and very roughly poured the medicinal liquid into his mouth with the other. The Zither Shio's heart skipped a beat, and he felt that the little lady's ice-cold hand was actually a bit frightening. "Take half a bottle of antidote a day, and take it for 2 days. After Miss Chiao expressionlessly said this, she picked fifth young Master Qin up from the ground. Don't forget the 1,000,000 spirit coins and tearless grass. Fifth young Master Qin was filled with displeasure, and he raised his head with difficulty to glance at her. Why do you dislike me? Because I'm a cripple. He could tell that the little stoic was completely blunt with him, and it could even be said that she simply couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. This attitude was completely different from how she spoke to people like Qi Xianxian. Even though her eternally unchanging stoic expression seemed to be frozen in time, he could clearly tell that whether it was her conversational attitude or tone, it was vastly different from Qi Xianxian and the rest. What does it have to do with me whether you're a cripple or not? Miss Chiao irritably retorted. She couldn't be bothered to meddle in their Qin estate's affairs. If she hadn't happened to run into them today, she wouldn't have gone to look for them at all. To put it bluntly, the Qin estate's 5th Qin and Ming province's Ming Bao had nothing to do with her at all. Arbor lowered his head to glance at the person in his hand and creased his brows in displeasure. So troublesome, he still had to carry this person back to the academy to exchange for mission points. Fortunately, this trip wasn't completely fruitless. At least, he managed to capture the naughty tree seed fragments. Just as Arbor walked out of the courtyard with 5th Qin, he bumped into eldest young Sir Qin, who had come after hearing the news. Eldest young master was stunned at first, but then he smiled like a flower and waved the small fan in his hand. Aya, my Jojo, it's a small world indeed. The two of us are really fated. Arbor rolled his eyes at him. He wanted to walk around him, but when he saw the person in his hand, he hurriedly threw him over. I'll return it to you. Xiao Mu didn't say anything else and turned to leave after throwing him out. Remember to settle the account by tomorrow. 5th young Master Qin's complexion was a bit dark, and he only managed to stabilize himself after his eldest brother reached out to support him. When he turned around, he could only see the back of the little fellow's head. What a heartless and callous fellow. 5th young Sir Qin gnashed his teeth and clenched his fists. All he could see was that bit of spirit coins. Oh my Jojo, why are you running so fast? Eldest young Sir Qin blinked, and his figure flashed as he caught up to Arbor's footsteps. Subsequently, he reached out to stop her. A chance encounter is better than an invitation. See, our fate isn't shallow. How about this, let's have a meal together. Who wants to have a meal with you? Arbor looked at eldest young Sir expressionlessly. I've been fasting recently. Impossible. Eldest young Sir shook his head vigorously. You can't do without 3 meals a day. Arbor. Chapter 2975. This person in front of her was really asking for a beating. Madame Jojo felt an itch in her little hands. As though he had seen through her intentions, eldest young Master Qin deliberately took a few steps forward and grinned in front of Arbor. Jojo, look. In any case, we're from the same star domain. Don't keep pushing me away like this. Humph. Arbor couldn't be bothered to say anything more to him and slid past him. Unexpectedly, she moved quickly, but this guy Qin Xian was even faster. No matter how she moved, he was like a hot potato that stuck to her hand and couldn't be shaken off. No matter how much she tried to get away from him, he always stayed by her side. The little fellow could see his grinning face when she turned around, and she couldn't resist swinging her little hand at his head. What are you doing? Arbor angrily threw a punch, but eldest young Master Qin hastily reached out to block it. Jojo, you saved our family's old 5th. Eldest young Master Qin said with a smile. I have to show some appreciation, right? No need for appreciation. Miss Chiao waved her small hand. Just settle the consultation fee you owe me as soon as possible. Eldest young Master Qin silently twitched his mouth, and he turned to look at his pale-faced 5th brother. Jojo, look at Xiu's current condition. It's not good. You can't leave him to die. Let's find a place to sit down and have a meal first, then you can treat him properly. Eldest young Master Qin grinned and winked. Don't worry. I won't shortchange you for a single cent of the consultation fee. Arbor glared at him when she saw that this person refused to let go and had a rascal expression that said, I won't let you go until you treat my fifth brother. Eldest young Master Qin smiled fawningly at her. Jojo, let's go. Eldest young Master Qin flashed to fifth young master's side and nodded at him to support him. Old Fifth's health hadn't improved ever since he was drugged and tortured by that old fogey from the National Security Agency. He had taken plenty of medicine at home to recuperate, but the results weren't good. Now that he had the opportunity to grab little Jojo and show him to Lao Wu, it was naturally a good thing. Eldest young Master Qin was very confident in Arbor's medical skills. The three of them left the alley where the villa was located and circled around to the street. They found a relatively quiet restaurant and walked in. Arbor checked Qin Xiu's pulse expressionlessly and then said, just take the medicine I gave you on time. Really? Eldest young Sir Qin sat on the side, propping up his chin with one hand as he gazed unblinkingly at the little stoic. He said with a grin, Jojo, my fifth brother was previously assassinated by that old woman from the state security. You know how many kinds of drugs you have in your body. Fifth young Master Qin's handsome face flushed red, and he turned his head to look at his big brother who didn't watch his mouth. Was he really his biological brother? Sir Jojo's face was cold. He sat upright and still and said expressionlessly, I don't understand. Eldest young Master Qin, fifth young Master Qin glanced speechlessly at his elder brother. Eldest brother. Last time at Langfang, she was the one who helped. Eldest young Master Qin turned to look at his younger brother. Ah, that's right, Physician Chang also mentioned it to me last time. Xiao Qiao was the one who cured you in Langfang. Then that's it. Jojo must be very familiar with your illness. Jojo, how do you think my fifth brother's illness needs treatment to be completely eradicated? Chapter 2976. Arbor glared at him impatiently. Why are you so long-winded? I already said that he only needs to finish taking the medicine I gave him, and he'll be completely cured. Why did he have to ask the same question again and again? He was simply trying to find a topic to talk about. The little fellow felt that her saliva was about to dry up from explaining to this person. It was incredibly annoying. She picked up a cup of tea and took a sip before continuing expressionlessly, the messy medicinal powder in your younger brother's body has already been neutralized, so it won't cause him any major harm in the future. On the other hand, his internal organs have accumulated quite a bit of cold, heat, and evil qi. It hasn't been accumulated for a long time. He should take more licorice and other things and train his body. He shouldn't look so weak that he'll be blown away by a gust of wind. Bones and muscles can all be trained. Even if he's just a mortal, it's essential to strengthen the body. If he's this weak, it'll be difficult for him to even leave behind a descendant. Could it be that he wants to be an embroidered pillow that looks good on the outside but is useless? Cough, 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 cough. Eldest young Sir Qin choked on his tea and lowered his head to cough violently several times. On the other hand, fifth young Sir Qin, who was sitting on the side, was alternately stifled and agitated by Arbor's words. His pair of beautiful, moist eyes stared fixedly at Arbor, so angry that he was speechless. Not only was this young lady savage, but she also had a venomous tongue. She spoke for half a day and insulted him from beginning to end. One moment, she said he was weak, and the next moment, she said he was an embroidered pillow. She was openly and covertly insulting him. Also, she was a young lady, yet she talked about a man's descendant with an expressionless face. Didn't she think it was too much? Arbor glanced indifferently at the fifth young sir and took out a small box the size of a ring from his pocket. He pushed it in front of the fifth young sir and turned to ask the eldest young sir, do you have white maple in your family other than tearless grass? Take out some if you have it. This walnut pill isn't for sale to the outside world. The little Stoic said expressionlessly, it can nourish the blood, nourish the marrow, and strengthen the muscles and bones. It's suitable for you. In the end, she still wanted him to nourish his body. Was he that weak in her eyes? The fifth young master was so angry that he was speechless. Eldest young master's mouth twitched. He took out several herbs from his inner world and placed them in front of Arbor. The little Stoic reached out to take them and unceremoniously accepted them all. She glanced at eldest young master and felt that she had taken many things from him. Then, she kindly asked fifth young master, do you want the dragon tendon bone repairing pill? The fifth young master was enraged. Scram! On the side, eldest young Sir Chin couldn't help but cover his face. My God, his gentle and elegant fifth brother was actually angered by a little girl to the point of spouting such malicious words. There was really no one else like him, humph. The little Stoic snorted coldly and then stood up to stride away. The eldest young master hurriedly stood up as well. He stopped the little girl and said with a smile, Jojo, let's eat before you leave. Don't be angry. Things haven't been going well for our fifth brother recently, and he's not in a good mood. I'm in an even worse mood. Sir Jojo grumpily turned his small head away, but then his eyes suddenly lit up. He saw Mo Lien's figure appear at the restaurant's entrance extremely quickly and arrive in front of them in less than a second. Sir Jojo happily bounced to his side. Lien, where did you go just now? You still dare to talk about it? Mo Lien was enraged at the mention of this. Chapter 2977. That fragment little four was truly a good-for-nothing. Not only did he throw him out of the boundary, but he was also thoughtless enough to directly throw him out of Wind Thunder City. He made him run all the way back and even wasted some time. Arbor raised his hand to touch his handsome face that was somewhat frozen from the cold wind the entire way. Seeing his dark face, he couldn't help but ask curiously, where did little four throw you to? Outside the city. Arbor blinked. Don't worry, I'll take care of it for you. Mo Lien nodded, feeling a bit angry when she thought of that swindler. Greetings to the Crown Prince. As soon as Mo Lien turned around, she met Qin Xian's spurious gaze, and she immediately became displeased. Why was this guy here? It couldn't be that he harbored some unrealistic thoughts about his wifey, right? Mo Lien reflexively grasped Arbor's small hand tightly. She looked at Qin Xian and Qin Xiu with a cold face, then her gaze paused on Qin Xiu, and she asked in surprise, Jojo, you found fifth Qin? That's right. Arbor nodded his small head. I found him by chance not long after we came out of the boundary. Mo Lien recalled Qi Xuanchuan's previous words and felt that her Qiao was indeed an extremely lucky person. Jojo, then you can go to the mission center to exchange your points after we return. Mo Lien grasped his small hand. Let's go back to the academy. Since they found him, there was naturally no need to stay in the inner city. Fifth young Master Qin pursed his lips and didn't say anything, but his gaze swept over Mo Lien very coldly. As expected, in these people's eyes, he, a good-for-nothing, was merely an item needed to provide mission points. The little Stoic was greedy and sharp-tongued, but most importantly, she was vain. Looking at it now, this Stoic face's taste wasn't that great. She probably followed the Crown Prince because of his noble status and wanted to curry favor with him. The little Stoic was disinclined to care about what fifth young Master Qin was thinking. Her husband pulled her small hand, and the two of them walked towards the staircase. Qin Xian sighed and looked at the backs of the two people as they left. His gaze was somewhat complicated. I want to eat wontons. Mo Lien lowered her head and smiled at her. I'll cook it for you when we get back. Sir Jojo nodded. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked, by the way, did that holy Sun Mi Yen say when he will set off for the secret realm? 3 days later. Mo Lien smiled. Do you want to fuse with the fragment Little Four? Arbor shook his head. Let Little Four play for a while. Whether it wants to merge with Chiu or not, it's up to it. Mo Lien raised her hand and stroked her little head. The Sun Moon Temple is near the Red River Canyon. We have to take the water route to get there. Just the Du Chunjiang alone will take about a day's journey. Flying is naturally prohibited above the Du Chunjiang. Arbor immediately looked at him curiously and asked, why is it prohibited from flying? Mo Lien shook his head. I don't know. It's been like this for years. Some people also say that it's because there are immortals in the river with boundless magic power living under the water. If cultivators who pass by dare to use their spiritual power to forcefully ascend into the air, they will be destroyed without a trace. Arbor curiously followed Mo Lien out of the restaurant, and the two of them headed for the Royal Academy. Before they could walk 2 steps, Arbor suddenly stopped and shouted, "Oh no, I forgot to bring my points back." What points? Wait for me. Arbor's figure flashed, and he once again returned to that small restaurant. Chapter 2978. In less than a few seconds, Arbor ran out with a person in her arms, and our dear Qin Xian chased after her, both amused and exasperated. Jojo, you can't be like this. Eldest young Sir Qin wordlessly followed after her and reached out to rescue fifth young Sir Qin, whose complexion had darkened. Prince Mo's handsome face also darkened, and he hugged the little fellow to his side while kicking fifth young Sir Qin in passing. In the blink of an eye, Qin Xian hastily pulled his younger brother back and dodged that kick. Then, he glared at Prince Mo and said irritably, "Your Highness, my younger brother is only a mortal. How can he end up well after you kick him?" Sir Chiao took a step forward and said seriously, "Are you thinking of robbing our Sikong Star battle team's mission points?" Qin Xian was even more speechless. "No. Don't worry, you're the one who earned the points. I absolutely won't interfere. Hey, no one's fighting with you over it." Arbor nodded and extended a fair and tender small hand with a serious expression that said, "I have to bring the points back." If it weren't for the little stoic's expression being too serious, the 3 men would have thought she was joking. It turned out that this little fellow was serious. She seriously wanted to bring the points back to the academy. Mo Lien's eyebrows twitched, and she coughed lightly and said, "Actually, 5th Qin only needs to report to the mission center after returning. There really isn't a need to trouble your dainty hand to carry him back to the academy." Lady Chiao blinked her eyes and retracted her hand. She then looked at the 3 of them with an expressionless face. Her face was serious and serious. Oh. If it weren't for his 5th brother's truly ugly expression, eldest young Sir Qin would have burst into laughter. This little thing was still so amusing. At this time, Arbor also realized that she had made a blunder, but her stoic face absolutely wouldn't let others see any trace of vexation. The next day, Ling Gu dragged a large cart full of spirit coins to the entrance of Donglin Garden. She instructed the servants to move boxes of spirit coins from the cart and pile them up in the courtyard. When Xiao Mu came out, she saw that the entire courtyard was piled up to the brim. The little fellow casually flipped through them and turned to look at Ling Gu, who was looking up at the sky. "Why did you send so many?" In terms of medicinal ingredients, eldest young Master Qin Xian had given her enough yesterday. All that was left was 1,000,000 spirit coins. So, he decided to pay them off. At this time, the things piled up in her courtyard were priceless gems and jade wares, expensive calligraphy and paintings, precious lingji mushrooms, and so on. There were hundreds of spirit coin chests, which added up to about 4 to 5 million spirit coins. Arbor glanced at Ling Gu and did not say anything. He took the 1,000,000 spirit coins and turned around to leave. "Hey, wait a moment." Ling Gu couldn't help but call out to her. She pointed at the other chests on the ground and said, "These are all gifted to you by my young master. I only take what I deserve." Xiao Mu threw down this sentence and entered the room by herself, not paying any more attention to him. After Ling Gu returned with her head drooped, she told Fifth Young Sir Qin everything that had happened. Fifth Young Sir was so angry that the veins on his forehead were throbbing. This girl was pretending in front of him. She clearly loved money, but she didn't want it when he gave it to her. Fifth Young Sir was fuming inside. When Ling Gu asked him with trepidation, "Young Sir, how should we deal with these?" Fifth Young Sir sneered. "Burn them all." Chapter 2979. Although Ling Gu had a pained expression, since the young master had spoken, she could only do as he said. There were so many good things, such as lingji mushrooms and snow lotuses. The young master actually burned them all in a fit of anger. In the end, it was all that stoic-faced girl's fault. She should have just accepted them properly. Ling Gu secretly raised her eyes to glance at the fifth young master. Seeing him enter with a cold expression, the door to the side room was tightly shut with a bam. At the same time, in a private residence in the inner city, Madame Goen's ear-piercing curses could be heard. The maidservant Kai Hui pushed open the door with fear and trepidation. She was almost hit by a cup that flew straight at her. She quickly knelt on the ground and cried, "Madam, madam, please calm down. Why is it only you? Where's Kai Hui? Where did she go? I asked her to cook some bird's nest porridge. Why is she still missing? Is it because my words no longer have any effect now?" Kai Hui shuddered and quickly went forward on her knees to curry favor. "Madam, don't be angry. Later, Kai Hui will go to the small kitchen to take a look." "Why aren't you going?" Madame Goen roared angrily. Kai Hui shuddered and didn't dare to say anything. She quickly got up from the ground and walked backward to the door. "Wait," Madame Goen coldly shouted with a gloomy expression. "Yes, madam. Give me the bronze mirror over there." Madame Goen said again with a gloomy expression, unwilling to give up. Just now, she had already taken several kinds of pills to restore her appearance. Thinking about it, it should have taken effect by now. Kai Hui shuddered and quickly advised softly, "Madam, it's better for you to recuperate peacefully now, give it to me." Madame Goen's expression instantly changed, as if she was very dissatisfied with Kai Hui for daring to refute her to her face. Kai Hui quickly crawled over, took out a bronze mirror, and handed it to Madame Goen. Madame Goen took a deep breath and looked at herself in the bronze mirror. She almost fainted from what she saw. His originally tender and fair face was now darker than charcoal, as if he had been roasted in a furnace for several days. It was so dark that it was almost comical. He also had a big red nose with a black malignant tumor growing on the tip of his nose. It was as big as half a finger and was extremely conspicuous. Ah! Madame Goen was so angry that she threw the bronze mirror to the ground and threw everything around her that could be thrown. She couldn't believe that even after her emergency treatment, her face was still affected by the poison. That damned little black snake. Of all the places it could bite, it actually bit her nose. "Arbor, Arbor, I'm going to kill you, Arbor. Arbor." Mrs. Goen screamed as she fell and hit the ground. Her hatred for Arbor had reached its peak. Kai Hui didn't dare to be rash. She stood to the side timidly, not daring to say anything. "What are you waiting for? Invite the best alchemists in the city." She wanted to treat her face. How was she going to go out and meet people with such a dark and poisoned face? "Yes, yes." Kai Hui hurriedly got up from the ground and rushed out of the door. The current madam was really too scary. She could explode in anger at any time and vent the depression in her heart on any little girl. She didn't want to become that unlucky cannon fodder. Chapter 2980. 3 days later. Prince Zheng's estate, Princess Consort. A young maidservant with a long face and slender eyebrows quickly walked into the main hall and bowed to Shi Yongyan, who was sitting at the head of the table. "How is it?" Shi Yongyan used a wet handkerchief to lightly wipe the pastry crumbs from the corner of her mouth as she asked with an indifferent gaze. "Prince has invited all the famous doctors in the imperial capital, saying that he wants to diagnose young Master Hua." That maidservant cleverly moved forward and lowered her voice to speak to Shi Yongyan. "All the famous doctors are helpless." Shi Yongyan sneered indifferently and gently put down the teacup in her hand. She stood up and said, "Let's go to the Hua courtyard to take a look at second young master's condition." A moment later, Shi Yongyan had just stepped into the Hua courtyard with her maidservant Fu when they heard loud cries from inside, mixed with Su Shihua's father's angry yell. "Kong, are you just going to watch someone beat your younger brother like this? Who exactly is your biological brother? Don't you feel distressed seeing Hua in such a half-dead state?" "No. Bring father into the palace immediately, I want to see His Majesty. I want to explain this situation to His Majesty." Su Shihua's father cursed, "Why can he do whatever he wants just because he's the crown prince? How can he beat my Hua into such a state?" "Ah, my Hua Shi Yongyan's eyes revealed traces of mockery. This family was truly too amusing. There was actually such a brainless fellow who wanted to enter the palace to reason with His Majesty. "Father." Mo Shikong's tired voice came from inside the room. Shi Yongyan had someone push open the door forcefully. She strode in with her head held high and her back ramrod straight. "Prince, you wouldn't be so muddle-headed as to listen to your father's words and bring him into the palace to see His Majesty and plan to complain about His Highness the Crown Prince, right? Woman, do you have any manners? Why did you come in so rashly?" Su Shitao turned back from the bedside and glared at Shi Yongyan. She had never been on good terms with her sister-in-law. Ever since she, her parents, and her second brother came to the Jing Palace, she felt that she was under her sister-in-law's control. She even had to look at her sister-in-law's face when it came to food, clothing, and other necessities. This made her feel very unhappy every time. Mo Shikong looked at his wife unhappily. "Yongyan, what kind of attitude is this? Your Highness, honest words are unpleasant to the ear and beneficial to your actions. Please don't think that this concubine's words are unpleasant to hear." Shi Yongyan couldn't help but sneer, "If you insist on doing things your own way and insist on bringing father-in-law to the palace to complain, then you'll have no choice but to do so. I'm afraid that you will soon be implicated by your short-sighted father. What kind of person was His Majesty? How could His Majesty be in the mood to listen to you? Moreover, His Highness the Crown Prince was His Majesty's biological son, his biological son. What kind of father would not help his own son and even side with outsiders like them? So what if Su Shihua is dead? Could it be that their Jing Palace was going to risk their lives against His Highness the Crown Prince for a mere Su Shihua? Wasn't this a joke?" Shi Yongyan's gaze coldly stared at Su Shitao. "Younger sister Tao, this matter was completely caused by you. You should properly reflect on yourself. You must not be so willful in the future." Su Shitao's eyes were red with anger. He stomped his feet and shouted, "Eldest brother." Mo Shikong also stared at Shi Yongyan with an unhappy expression. He discovered that she seemed to have changed into a different person today. Her words were blunt and very impolite, making him somewhat embarrassed in front of his parents and younger sister. Chapter 2981. Shi Yongyan sighed and bowed to Mo Shikong. She said faintly, "Your Highness, please don't mind this concubine's words. Honest words are unpleasant to the ear. This concubine is completely thinking for the sake of your Highness. If today your Highness brought father-in-law into the palace to complain to His Majesty, how do you think His Majesty will deal with this matter?" Mo Shikong pursed his lips and didn't speak. Although he didn't speak, his heart was clearer than anyone else. His Majesty certainly wouldn't say anything. His Majesty secretly loved his son so much that he even gave such an important elite force like the Emperor's shadow guards to the Crown Prince. This was the difference between close and distant relatives. No matter how much Mo Shikang sacrificed and did, in His Majesty's heart, he was different from Mo Lien. Your Highness, we can only use medicine to protect young Master Hua's heart for the time being, and then find a way to help him recuperate. An old doctor who took Su Shihua's pulse said. He injured his natal meridians, and his skin was severely burned by the fire. No one can guarantee whether he can wake up or not. Mo Shikang's face was very ugly. In fact, the words of these old doctors were basically the same as what the old doctors of the Imperial Academy said. This meant that Su Shihua himself couldn't possibly recover to his original state. After all, if it was him, Mo Shikang, who spat out that golden dragon fire, even he might not be able to completely withstand it, let alone Su Shihua, who was extremely arrogant at such a young age. Su Shihua had always thought that his own cultivation was considered outstanding among his peers. Xiao Mu had surpassed him and even defeated him effortlessly, making him feel emotionally and physically that he couldn't accept it at all. Your Highness, you also heard the doctor's words just now. I hope you will consider it carefully. Shi Yongqian lowered her eyes. After saying this, she walked out of the door with her servant girl, Fu He. Su He and his daughter were left angrily staring at Shi Yongqian's back. Eldest brother, look at what sister-in-law said. How can she push all the blame onto me? Su Shitao suppressed his anger and said, this matter was clearly caused by that crown princess. The reason why second brother became like this was also because of her. Enough. Mo Shikang didn't want to listen to Su Shitao's nagging anymore, so he turned to Su He and said, Dad, you heard what Wang Fei said just now. Second brother's current situation is very bad. Forcing him to stay will only add to his pain. Su He wished he could slap his eldest son's face. He glared at Mo Shikang and shouted at him, are you going to leave me to die? It's not like your brother can't be saved. You want to give up the treatment. Father. Mo Shikang knew that with his second brother's current state, his father and the others would definitely cry, make a fuss, and threaten to hang themselves, causing the entire Jing mansion to have no peaceful days. His heart was stifled, but he still said, Father, I don't want to give up either, but the problem is that it's useless even if I don't give up. Second brother's injuries have already spread to his entire body, and all his internal organs have been damaged. When Su Shihua's mother, Liang Shi, heard this, she started sobbing softly. The more Su He listened to the crying, the more annoyed he became. He shouted at him, shut up. In any case, you must do your best to save Hua. If you can't, then enter the palace and ask His Majesty for the best medicine and the best doctor. Su He said self-righteously, he was beaten by the crown prince. No matter what, His Majesty should do something. Chapter 2982. When Shi Yongyan received the news, she was almost angered into laughter by this naive eunuch's strange words. She really had the face to force her husband to go to the imperial palace to ask for a pharmacist and medicinal herbs. Could it be that the great emperor really didn't know that this had happened? The great emperor's spies were all over the divine continent. His Highness the Crown Prince had almost beaten Mo Shikang, this good-for-nothing younger brother of his, to death. How could the great emperor not know? The great emperor still hadn't said anything. What did that mean? That meant that he didn't want to care at all. It was hard for this Su He to keep saying that he wanted to go to the great emperor to complain. What did he want to complain about? He wanted to tell the great emperor, Io, your son beat our Su family's child to death. It was simply ridiculous and brainless to the extreme. In front of Shi Yongyan stood two men in black who didn't speak with their hands hanging down. Go. Shi Yongyan said faintly and put the porcelain cup in her hand on the table. A cold light flashed through her eyes. These two bodyguards trained by the Shi family were naturally very obedient to Shi Yongyan's words. The two people quietly came to Hua courtyard. Looking in from the side room's window, they saw Yang Shi crying and sitting by the bed to take care of her son. Su He and Su Shitao were no longer there. Zheng Wang should also be in the study at this time. One of them shot out spiritual power from his finger and pointed at Yang Shi, this ordinary person. Soon, they floated in through the window and saw Su Shihua lying on the bed like a charcoal on the verge of death. The two of them looked at each other, and then one of them nodded slightly at the other. They quickly walked forward and pulled up the brocade quilt that covered Su Shihua's body, and suddenly pressed it against his face. That bodyguard pressed one hand on Su Shihua's face. At first, Su Shihua didn't have any movement. Later, he slowly began to struggle. He was already burnt to a crisp. His breathing was faint and intermittent. If it wasn't for the doctors forcibly using medicine to keep him alive, he would have already died. At this time, with the brocade quilt on his face, he couldn't even breathe. Su Shihua struggled in the man's hands for less than a minute before he was completely powerless. After another 2 minutes, the Shi family's guard realized that his subordinate was completely motionless. Only then did he slowly loosen his grip and place 2 fingers on Su Shihua's neck to test him. He then turned around and nodded at the other guard. Not long after the two returned to report, before noon, Mo Shikang angrily came to Jing Yuan with a manservant called Xiao Bao to find her. As soon as Mo Shikang entered the room, he kicked the coffee table next to him and shouted angrily, "Shi Yongyan, did you do that to Hua?" Shi Yongyan looked at the man in front of her coldly. Princess Consort Zheng was originally an average-looking person. In addition, her forehead was narrow and slightly sunken. Her nose was sharp and narrow, but her mouth was quite big. She was born with a mean and ungrateful appearance. No man would be satisfied with such a wife. If it weren't for the Shi family's wealth and influence, King Zheng wouldn't have been willing to marry such a wife. In the 3 years since the couple got married, they had always treated each other with respect. This was the first time the couple had met each other with red faces and thick necks. Mo Shikang looked at the woman's face in front of him and a trace of irritation and disgust flashed through his eyes. "Shi Yongyan, do you have no brain? Am I brainless, or is Wang Yi indecisive and doesn't know his limits?" Chapter 2983. Shi Yongyan looked at Mo Shikang calmly, but a complicated and disappointed look flashed across her eyes. She originally thought that the man she married was just not decisive in his actions, but now it seemed that he was simply soft-hearted and short-sighted. Ever since they found that disgusting family, King Zheng's residence had been in a lot of trouble. In fact, she really couldn't understand her husband's thoughts. In terms of blood ties, there was a slight connection. Blood ties were the deepest fetters that couldn't be severed from the beginning. But wouldn't it be ridiculous to talk about how deep blood ties were? King Zheng was an orphan since young. He followed Her Majesty the Empress from the age of 3 and was raised by her until he was a little over 10 years old. It could be said that King Zheng spent much more time with Her Majesty than Her Majesty's biological son Mo Lian. Ever since Her Majesty's accident 17 years ago, the entire Divine Prefecture was in turmoil for a period of time. In recent years, Divine Prefecture finally became peaceful, and their days slowly became better. King Zheng had been thinking about it since a few years ago and began to search for his family. Family? Shi Yongyan couldn't help but snort. It was simply ridiculous. What kind of family was a parent who could abandon you without hesitation when you were fleeing for your life when you were young? Instead of saying that the Su family brought their children to the imperial capital to search for their family, it was better to say that it was King Zheng who sent people to find their family and then brought them over to provide for them. Shi Yongyan really couldn't understand how much affection could there be between these so-called family members who had never lived together since young. However, King Zheng was a stubborn person who was foolishly filial to the extreme. "You sent people to deal with my second brother, and now you dare to say such things. Do you really think I'm afraid of your Shi family? Your Highness. Shi Yongyan stood up from the chair and looked at him coldly. Yongyan is doing this for your Highness's sake. That Su Shihua is already in this state, and your Highness still wants to waste manpower, resources, and energy on him. In the end, not only will it be a waste of effort, but it will also drag down our entire residence. You. What kind of situation does your Highness think our residence is in now? From 3 days ago until now, your Highness, have you calculated how many spirit coins and herbs you have spent on that living corpse? There are so many people in the residence, and the expenses are already high. Your Highness, you also know that ever since you brought second brother and third sister over, the palace's expenses have increased by several times. If it wasn't for this concubine using the dowry stores to supplement the budget, do you think this palace would be able to survive? This is the reason why you sent someone to deal with my second brother. Mo Shikong trembled with anger. In your eyes, is that money more important than my second brother's life? Princess Consort Jing used the handkerchief in her hand to wipe the corners of her mouth, and a cold smile appeared on her harsh face. Yes. The Prince of Jing raised his hand and was about to slap Princess Consort Jing's face. Princess Consort Jing raised her head and looked at him coldly. If Prince continues to let Su Shihua drag things out, the entire prince's estate will be dragged to death sooner or later. I'm just helping His Highness solve a big problem. Could it be that Prince will really listen to father-in-law's words and enter the palace to ask His Majesty for medicinal herbs and pharmacists for the sake of Su Shihua, this living dead? Everything this concubine does is for the sake of your Highness. Your Highness insists on going against the Crown Prince for the sake of the Su family. The gains do not make up for the losses. Chapter 2984. Presumably, your Highness has clearly seen His Highness the Crown Prince's temper after this period of time. Do you really think that you will have a good time after falling out with His Highness? Shi Yongyan clenched her fists tightly and did her best to control the anger that was swirling in the depths of her heart. There had to be a limit to being brainless, right? Mo Shikong furiously glared at the woman in front of him and suddenly recalled the icy words Mo Lien left behind before leaving. Be Prince Jing properly. Be Prince Jing properly. Damn it. Mo Shikong felt repulsed, irritated, and gloomy. His identity as Prince Jing could really be removed at any time, right? Right now, Crown Prince Mo's words were like a sharp sword hanging over his head. It could drop down at any moment and snatch everything away from him, snatch it away. Mo Shikong had difficulty breathing, and his heart was so stifled that it was almost about to explode. He fiercely glared at Shi Yongyan before abruptly flinging his sleeves and turning to leave with large strides. If my parents ask about this matter, you can explain it to them yourself. Princess Consort Jing was so angry that she plopped down on the wooden armchair. Her chest heaved up and down as she panted heavily. In the end, it was her, the wife, who was in the wrong. Could it be that everything she did was not for the sake of Prince Jing and Prince Jing's estate? On Lady Jojo's end, she naturally did not know that after Mo Shikong brought Su Shihua back to the imperial capital, he went through a lot of trouble to find someone to treat him and caused a great commotion in Prince Jing's estate. Even if she knew, she would probably just purse her lips and say, it's a waste of effort. As for 7th Yen, this little fellow, although his dragon form was nothing special, his strength absolutely could not be underestimated. The little fellow was still in the late-stage infant stage and had yet to enter the growth stage. If he spat out a mouthful of blazing dragon's breath, he could definitely kill a level 15 great spiritual master. Lady Jojo was completely uninterested in what Prince Jing's estate was up to. She, Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others were ready to set off early in the morning and arrived at the learning area plaza. Leading a row of white-robed priests, Holy Sun Mi Yen was already standing at the front of the square, on the most eye-catching arena. His white robe fluttered in the wind, and he had a compassionate expression on his face. It was as if he was shrouded in holy light just by standing there. Arbor secretly rolled his eyes, then turned to Prince Mo and whispered, "Did they say when they would depart?" Prince Mo knew that the little fellow was a little impatient, and could not help but secretly hold back his laughter, saying softly, "For this trip, other than the two of us, we will also select 30 people from the academy to go with us. We will probably only depart when everyone is present." Little Fatty, who was known for his information, squeezed his way forward and said, "Hey, I heard that there are more than 30 people from our academy." This time, the Sun Moon Temple was especially generous. Not only did they choose 30 people from our academy, but they also chose 30 people from our academy. It seems like they've even selected some students from other academies. In addition, they seem to have selected some people with special talents from the Divine Land and brought them along. Little Fatty rubbed his chin and muttered, "I suspect that this trip will definitely be dangerous. Is everyone here? Let's start the roll call now. Mu Roxuan. Gui Xuan. Long Min." On the side, the little priestess added with a grin, "Those whose names are called, please walk to the front." Chapter 2985. Zhongli Jiwei. Chen Baojia. The young men and women whose names were called each gracefully flew onto the large stage and stood still, their expressions rather complacent. But that was to be expected. To be able to break through the top 30 rankings in the previous arena competition, not only did they have strength, but luck was also indispensable. The little stoic expressionlessly looked at them. When Nether Leopard's name was announced, everyone was stunned and whispered to each other for a while. Soon after, they saw a person jump up from the back of the crowd like a monkey and rapidly run up the large stage. "Excuse me, excuse me. Thank you, excuse me." Ming Bao ran up the stage with a grin and cupped his hands at Chen Baojia, Zhongli Jiwei, and the others standing next to him. Chen Baojia swept him a glance and deliberately leaned closer to Zhongli Jiwei, muttering softly, "I wonder who he is. Everyone is outside looking for him like a net, but he's actually enjoying the show and doesn't mind it blowing up." Previously, everyone thought that Ming Bao was the same as 5th young Master Qin and was abducted while shopping in the inner city. In the end, reality proved that this guy had gone crazy from playing and forgot to return to the academy. Although the vice president had already harshly reprimanded him, the students who went out to look for him were all very gloomy and dissatisfied. They only felt that this guy was too unreliable and didn't know his limits at all. The students of the Divine Province and Sangzhou kept muttering in their hearts, as expected, an uncivilized place like Ming Province produces all these baffling talents. "His Highness Yasi is coming down," someone called out softly. Everyone's gazes turned to the steps. Arbor and Mo Lian's group were standing in the front row, so Ming Yasi naturally saw them when he passed by. This was Miss Qiao's first time seeing Ming Province's crown prince after returning. Seeing that his complexion was a bit pale, as expected, he looked like he had just recovered from a serious illness. The strangest thing was that one of Ming Yasi's arms also seemed to be broken, and it was still tied up in a sling. Ming Yasi's gaze coldly swept over Mo Lian. Sir Jojo also couldn't resist raising her small head to look at her husband. Earlier, her husband had said that he had left behind a wisp of his divine soul and led a group of hidden guards to cause trouble for Ming Yas. Her husband also said that he would beat Ming Yas up to the point where he wouldn't be able to get out of bed for 2 or 3 days. Looking at it now, it was true. Although Yas could walk normally now, his arm was still broken. Judging from the state he was in 3 days ago, he might be in an even worse state. Jojo silently retracted his gaze and waited for the priestess to call the 30 students onto the stage. Holy Sun Mayan said reluctantly, "Crown Prince of Godly Land and Crown Princess, please come up." The little fellow held her husband's hand and stomped up the arena. She asked impatiently, "When are we leaving?" They were so long-winded and even held a roll call ceremony. The efficiency of the Sun Moon Temple was really bad. Holy Sun Mi Yen glanced at her with a fake smile. Then, he ignored the little girl's question and said in a deep voice, "In this trip to the Sun Moon Mystic Realm, there are dangers as well as opportunities. There are some things that I want to make clear to everyone before we leave. If everyone is willing to go to the Sun-Moon Mystic Realm with the temple, please sign an oath first. I guarantee that if there are any dangers on this trip, I will take full responsibility. Our temple won't take any responsibility. Holy Sun Mi Yen said coldly. Chapter 2987. The rest of the people looked at the Divine Land Crown Prince and the Crown Princess with a strange expression, and they secretly glanced at Holy Sun Mi Yan's face. Arbor would be stupid to sign that oath. It was clearly written in the oath that she had to hand over all her treasures, and only one could be kept. Bah! How could she hand over the treasure that was in Sir Jojo's pocket? That was just bullshit. Although she wasn't sure if this oath would have any binding effect on her galaxy. Why would she take the risk? She and her lotus were the two places that the people of the Divine Hall used to buy the lives of the holy nun. She had to figure out what a bunch of muddle-headed guys were thinking. Holy Sun Mi Yen glared at Arbor angrily. After a while, he squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. Isn't the matter of the holy nun already over? Little Crown Princess turned hostile and stared coldly at Holy Sun Mi Yen, saying, I don't want to turn the page now. What can you do to me? You! What a load of nonsense! Shut up! Arbor roared at him impatiently, and then shouted into the air, Where are the guards of the Crown Princess? Everyone twitched the corners of their mouths inexplicably. Bam! 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 Several figures immediately flew out from their hiding places and stood in a row behind Little Crown Princess. Go and return the mining rights contract of Chest Mountain Spiritual Mine to the Divine Hall. By the way, capture that Yaoguang holy nun for me, the Crown Princess. I, the Crown Princess, want her to die right now. Yes. Qi Xian, Duan Muqing, and the others expressed their helplessness at the same time. Their Lord Xiao Qiao was truly a strange little fellow. She could really turn hostile without any hesitation, and didn't care about Holy Sun Mi Yan's old face at all. Holy Sun Mi Yan only felt that the anger in his chest was about to erupt like a volcano. He looked around and saw that the other 30 people on the stage didn't say anything. Instead, they were all looking at him as if they were watching a show. It seemed that regardless of whether or not any of them had any grudges with the Little Crown Princess, everyone's thoughts were the same at this moment. They were all standing by the side of the Little Crown Princess who had turned hostile. Holy Sun Mi Yen took a deep breath. Call them back. Seeing that those one-track-minded hidden guards were really going to capture Yaoguang Saintess, Holy Sun Mi Yen was so furious that his lungs were about to explode. His mouth trembled as he couldn't help but roar. What? The two of you are under special circumstances, so you don't have to sign it. However, the others, oath. Xiao Mu hollered at the flabbergasted young priest. The priest's hand trembled, and he quickly handed a new oath to Arbor. The little stoic expressionlessly skimmed through it again. Then, she took out a cinnabar brush from her inner world and circled a few words on that oath before making a cross. You can be responsible for your own life and death, but the others must move together with you and listen to your commands. There's no need for bullshit like that. After entering the secret realm, each of you will act separately. If you can, then you can. If you can't, then go and capture that Yaoguang Saintess. What are you waiting for? Enough. Holy Sun Mi Yen tore off that refined and noble appearance of his and roared furiously, if you want to act separately, then so be it. Do you think that the temple has to go with you? You can only take one treasure from the secret realm. This condition absolutely couldn't be reduced. End of the 6th watch. Chapter 2988. Arbor pursed her small lips and looked at the red-faced Holy Sun Mi Yen. She humphed and said, ridiculous. She had to argue with Sir Jojo until her face turned red. It was truly too boring. Sir Jojo originally didn't want to insult her, but she had to come to her and beg to be insulted. Holy Sun Mi Yan's chest felt stifled, and he didn't want to continue looking at the little stoic. After everyone successfully signed that oath, Holy Sun Mi Yan couldn't resist looking at Arbor and Mo Lien. The more he looked, the more he found them pleasing to the eye. These two people didn't sign an oath, so they naturally weren't bound by the laws of heaven and earth. If they found more than one treasure in the secret realm, wouldn't that be letting these two people off easy pa? Holy Sun Mi Yan immediately tossed this thought to the back of his mind. How could they have such great luck? It was already pretty good to be able to find one or two treasures in a secret realm filled with traps. Although these two people's cultivations weren't bad, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't be abused by the secret realm's traps, formations, and spirit beasts. Humph. Holy Sun Mi Yan held his head high and plastered that holy and haughty mask on again. He said gravely to everyone, since no one has any objections, then let's prepare to set off. Our first stop is the Great North-facing Forest's Northern Transportation Formation. Holy Sun Mi Yan took out a large air transportation spiritual tool and summoned everyone onto it. This air transportation spiritual tool's appearance was a bit like a scabbard and could accommodate about 40 people. There were 32 students in the academy, plus the Holy Sun Mi Yan and a few priests. There were 39 people in total. Therefore, it was quite crowded inside. Sir Jojo expressionlessly sat in the innermost corner with her hands on her knees. She sat obediently next to her husband in a very upright sitting posture. When the air transportation spiritual tool started, it jolted slightly. Zhongli Jiwei's gaze swept over and saw His Highness the Crown Prince instantly reach out to support the little Crown Princess' soft waist. It was so sore that a mouthful of sour water was stuck in her chest, unable to move up or down. Damn it! Did this couple have to be so lovey-dovey? The little Crown Princess was sitting upright. Could it be that she would fall from the air transportation spiritual tool's jolt? The Crown Prince's attention was always on that woman. She was so angry that her chest hurt. Arbor felt a strong gaze directed at her. She raised her head in displeasure and looked at Zhongli Jiwei with a frosty gaze. The corners of the little fellow's mouth curled up into a cold smile. Zhongli Jiwei felt a chill in her face, and her body couldn't help but tremble slightly. Chen Baojia, who was sitting next to Zhongli Jiwei, hurriedly gave Arbor a very stiff smile and then pulled Zhongli Jiwei's sleeve. Everyone on the air transportation spiritual tool sat there with different thoughts in their minds. Some of them secretly looked at Arbor and Mo Lien, while others looked at each other and whispered to each other. In any case, the students had successfully set off on their journey. Before they left, Principal Yun looked at them kindly and reminded them kindly, everyone must remember that you only have one life. Treasures were indeed good, but life was even more precious. Don't put yourself in danger because of some worldly possessions. Sir Jojo sat for about 5 minutes, then took out an orange from his inner world and pulled his husband's sleeve. Mo Lien couldn't help but smile. She reached out to take the orange and peeled it with a smile. The little guy was, in fact, a foodie. Chapter 2989. Even though she had never admitted this point. But reality proved that as long as the little fellow was idle and had nothing to do, she would always be holding snacks or fruits in her hands. What did she like to eat when reading books? What did she like to eat when watching competitions? Even when she was training, she never forgot to eat after coming out of closed-door cultivation. The first thing she did was expressionlessly look for food. Mo Lien snickered inwardly. After perfectly peeling an orange, she handed it to Sir Jojo. Sir Jojo accepted it expressionlessly. Qi Xian, who was sitting on the other side of her, silently twitched her mouth. Jojo, this little foodie, was seriously a bit adorable with her stoic expression. Sir Jojo glanced at Qi Xuanxuan's odd expression from the corner of his eye and took out another orange from his inner world and handed it to her. The two of them started eating in the last row. After finishing the orange, they switched to a banana. After finishing the banana, they took out some dried fruit and started nibbling on it. Then, they took turns eating pastries and candies. In the end, they even started munching on melon seeds. Duanyu, Wuxia, and the others, who were sitting in front of them, all twitched their mouths as they secretly suppressed their laughter. These two girls, they were completely treating this as an outing. Holy Sun Mi Yen finally couldn't take it anymore and said, "Set the table." Those two words were sonorous and forceful, almost causing people to choke with laughter. Although Lord Holy Sun's cultivation had reached the spiritual venerable realm, he was used to eating 2 meals a day. So in essence, Lord Holy Sun was also a bit of a foodie. If he wasn't in closed-door cultivation, he would eat every day. Because it was a bit crowded with 39 people, it was completely impossible to set up a small table from the side. Hence, the white-robed priests sat around Lord Holy Sun, each of them holding a bowl of food and handing a bowl of rice to Lord Holy Sun. They silently watched Lord Holy Sun eat gracefully and unhurriedly like this. Sir Jojo glanced at him and silently took back the pile of snacks. He took out his all-purpose food box from his inner world and took out a large pot of fresh fish soup. He also took out 3 to 4 plates of stir-fry and had Duanyu, the little fatty, and Wuxia turn around to carry them for him. Jojo-sama started eating expressionlessly. Qi Xuanxuan's mouth twitched. She stuffed a mouthful of rice into her mouth and almost burst out laughing. The little fatty hurriedly reached out to cover her mouth and cried out, Don't spit, we still have to continue eating later." Mo Yen was so amused by the little guy that she was about to cramp up. This little stoic had always been expressionless, but inexplicably, her entire body was brimming with comedic talent, making people want to smile knowingly. Holy Sun Mi Yen chewed the food in his mouth without tasting it. He only felt that his nose was filled with the aroma of the fish soup and all kinds of stir-fried food. He lowered his head and looked at the rice, steamed buns, and a plate of cold frozen duck meat in his bowl. That plate of frozen duck meat was old and dry. He instinctively wanted to throw it away. Gotcha! Holy Sun Mayan was so angry that he broke the chopsticks in his hand. Seated behind the saint, eldest young Master Qin couldn't help but rub his forehead. Why the hell did he have the urge to burst out laughing? How many spirit coins? Holy Sun Mi Yen suddenly spoke. He just couldn't understand. They both came out for training, so how could that neurotic little stoic still take out warm food? Chapter 2990. Just how freaking much of a foodie are you to be able to store so much food in your inner world? The little priest next to Sir Holy Sun cautiously reminded, "Sir, that stoic face often sells at exorbitant prices. Our family really doesn't need to spend so many spirit coins to buy that stoic face's sky-high price dishes." The two young masters of the Dou family couldn't help but stifle their laughter. In reality, the two of them had wanted to laugh since the beginning, but because they had to take Holy Sun Mi Yan's face into consideration, they endured with great difficulty. At this time, Sir Jojo had already eaten his fill. He took that pot of fish soup from Duanyu and held it himself. Then, he handed him a clean pair of chopsticks and a bowl of rice, indicating for him to eat. Hearing Sir Holy Sun's inquiry, the little stoic expressionlessly said, "1 pot is 200,000 spirit coins. A small bowl is 20,000 spirit coins." Cough cough cough, cough. Before Qi Xian could spit out the rice in her mouth, she was hastily stopped by the quick-witted little fatty. "Don't spit on Ancestor Xian, don't spit." They still had to continue eating, big sister. Holy Sun Mi Yan's expression was dark and gloomy. He stifled for a long time before saying, "Your price is even more expensive than the sky-high holy rice sold at Dragon Flame City's Kaidai veranda." Arbor aloofly looked up at him like he was looking at a pauper. "You can't afford it, so what are you asking for?" It was simply a waste of her saliva. Everyone, the little priest couldn't resist secretly reminding Sir Holy Sun, "Sir, actually, we don't have to talk to the little stoic." Was there something wrong with this Holy Sun? Why did he have to tease and talk to the stoic face? Every time, he would be angered to the point of vomiting blood. Wasn't he sick? Smack. The Holy Sun coldly ordered after slapping that priest's head, "Shut up. Give me a small bowl," the Holy Sun said furiously. Everyone couldn't resist wanting to laugh. The little stoic expressionlessly filled a bowl of fresh fish soup for Sir Holy Sun and had Lu Yu pass it over. The Holy Sun took a sip and immediately sensed the difference. This fish soup felt like it was freshly cooked in a restaurant. He could taste its fresh aroma, and his tongue felt like it was about to melt. Compared to his lukewarm rice, this bowl of fresh fish soup was a little hot. After the saint finished his bowl of fish soup, he turned his face away and stopped talking. Over at Duan Yu's place, they took turns eating lunch in threes before finally stopping. Arbor put away the bowls and chopsticks and let the diligent Chiochio wash them. The saint suddenly asked with a cold face, "Do you have steamed buns for sale?" It turned out that the saint had not eaten his fill. The saint added, "The kind that's piping hot, 500 spirit coins for one bun. You should become a robber, it suits you better." Everyone ridiculed inwardly. Subsequently, they heard eldest young Master Qin say, "Give me 2. When he turned around and saw Qinjiu looking at him with a pitiful expression, eldest young Sir Qin choked and hastily said, "Give me 4. 6, Omega Katoku said calmly. Eldest young Sir Qin silently took out his money pouch and took out 3,000 spirit coins to give to the little stoic in exchange for 6 piping hot meat buns. The stoic face expressionlessly put away the money and took out a pot of spiritual tea from her inner world, pouring a cup for Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others. Sir Holy Sun, who was currently chewing on a meat bun, couldn't resist the urge to spit at her. "I bought your steamed buns, so you should also give me a cup of tea."